Chapter 1097. Lin Yuan's face was very ugly. He didn't care about the blood-chi wolf demon that was slowly dissipating. Because the problem in front of him was too serious. Why didn't he have a demon core? Why was the way of promotion different from other demonic beasts? Was it because the system was playing tricks behind his back, or was it because he was not a demonic beast, but a human wearing the skin of a demonic beast? Did he not have a demon core from the beginning, or was his demon core in the hands of the system when it was condensed? He thought that he had gotten rid of the system's control and turned from a pawn to a collaborator. But he didn't expect that the clown was himself. Lin Yuan's eyes were gloomy, and he couldn't speak for a while. Ho, ho ho, after a long time, the sealed world was gradually unsealed. Lin Yuan, whose wounds had already healed, took a deep breath and flew in the direction of Shunning City, as if nothing had happened. At the same time, far away in the untainted world, Hong Jun, who was still wearing a snow-white robe, slowly opened his eyes. His eyes, which had always been calm and emotionless, suddenly flashed with surprise. He stretched out his right hand and quickly made a few gestures, but he didn't speak for a long time. He just frowned, as if he was thinking about something. Teacher. The Western Buddhists, who were called by Hong Jun, cupped their hands at the same time. Although they were smiling on the surface, they were inexplicably flustered in their hearts. After Hong Jun merged with the Way of Heaven, he had been in charge of the untainted world for countless years. The creatures of the untainted world under his command had conquered thousands of worlds. He had destroyed and annexed many large, medium, and small worlds. Many things had happened in these countless years, and even the untainted world had suffered more than one defeat in the battlefield of thousands of worlds. But there had never been a time when Hong Jun showed joy or anger on his face. The last time Hong Jun showed a strange expression, it was because there was a revelation in the untainted world. Any existence above the golden immortal could sense that the death tribulation of the Tao ancestor had appeared. It was just that no one was sure when this dictator would face the tribulation. This was the second time. The Tao ancestor actually frowned, as if he was thinking about something difficult to understand. As the Western sect that had also existed for countless years and created a huge Western sect, the two Western Buddhists, who had conflicts with Sanqing more than once, were naturally not stupid and slow-witted. When they thought of how the Tao ancestors suddenly called the two of them over and revealed such an expression, they probably did not know how big of a pit was waiting for them ahead. I asked the two of you to choose a capable disciple to go to that small world. Now, do you have anyone in mind? The expression on Hong Jun's face eased slightly, and he once again returned to his emotionless appearance. It was as if he wasn't the one who was frowning and pondering. His voice was as calm as ever, without the slightest emotion. Jiayin was silent for a moment and said in a deep voice, "Now that the cultivation tribulation is coming, the Xianmen sect and the Buddhism sect are preparing for war. They really can't choose a suitable candidate for the Tao ancestors' request, so they can only take a step back. I have already sent Qin Qi and Jingluan to set off. On this trip, they will definitely take the head of the Black Jiao for the Tao ancestor." Daoist Junti also took the opportunity to continue the conversation and said, "Although Qin Qi and Jingluan are serving the heavenly court, they have guarded the mountain gate for the Buddhism sect for many years. They have done their best to preach and guard the Dharma treasures. This time, they should have this opportunity to serve the Tao ancestor." At this point, Daoist Junti's expression was a little awkward. He added, "However, although these two generals have great magical powers, they might not be able to take down the Black Jiao. Therefore, on this trip, these two generals are only attracting the attention of the Black Jiao and those traitors. I have already ordered people to go to the Ren school to invite the Mosquito Daoran under the Grand Supreme Senior Brother. With the help of the Mosquito Daoran, a mere Black Jiao will naturally be easy to capture." When it came to the Mosquito Daoran, the Western Buddhism sect's expression was a little awkward. The mosquito Daoran was also a great demon that had only emerged during the god investiture tribulation. His methods were very strange. When he first appeared in the world, he ate the Holy Mother of Turtle spirit of the Jia school into an empty shell. Then, he went to the Western Paradise and swallowed 3 of the 12 grade lotus seeds of the Taoist, causing Buddhism to appear 1,000 years later. After that, although the Western Buddhism sect had taken down the mosquito Daoran, they were rescued by an unknown powerful cultivator. Other than knowing that the mosquito Daoran was a ferocious beast, the blood-winged black mosquito, they had gained nothing. Overall, they had suffered a great loss. Even many years later, the Western Buddhism sect only knew that the mosquito Daoran was a disciple of the Taishang sect. The one who had rescued the mosquito Daoran was also one of the incarnations of the Taishang sect. However, he had cast a spell to disguise himself. The 2 of them did not recognize him. In addition, they had no evidence at hand, so they could only suffer the consequences of their own actions. The main reason why they were sure that the mosquito Daoran was a disciple of the Taishang sect was that the 12 grade lotus seeds were destroyed, causing Buddhism to appear 1,000 years later. However, the Taishang sect had transformed into Li heir to establish Taoism during this period of time. He even left the legend of the 3,000 miles of purple qi, and the Tao Te Ching, which was known as the ultimate treasure of postnatal merit. No one knew where he went after that, but anyone with a bit of brain could figure it out. After Laozi left the Hanga Pass, no one knew where he went. However, he suddenly transformed into a Buddha and transformed into Shakyamuni to enlighten the Western region and India. A series of legends were also recognized by later generations of Buddhism to a large extent, treating Laozi as the original Buddha. In a sense, before the journey to the West began, the Western Buddhism sect and the Xianmen sect had not officially started the war. However, the Taishang sect had already given the Western Buddhism sect a fierce blow. Even if Buddhism later flourished, the Taishang sect still had to respect the Taishang sect as the original Buddha. And the start of all these combined blows was none other than the destruction of the 12 grade lotus seeds by the mosquito Daoran in the Western Nirvana. In other words, the Taishang sect had almost single-handedly suppressed the Western Buddhism sect and gave them a vicious beating. As a chess piece in the Taishang sect's plan, mosquito Daoran had played a trick on the Western Buddhism sect. If the Taishang sect had not followed up with a series of operations, they would not have even thought that mosquito Daoran was a disciple of the Taishang sect. However, this also proved the strength of mosquito Daoran. With the 2 generals Hang and Ha attracting the attention of everyone, and mosquito Daoran secretly waiting for an opportunity to assassinate, if they could not take down the Black Jiao, then even if the Western Buddhism sect sent out their own incarnations, the Black Jiao would still be able to escape unscathed. Good. Hongjun replied indifferently. There was still no joy or sorrow on his face. Even the Western Buddhism sect, who had thought about this for countless years with Hongjun, could not tell at this moment whether Hongjun agreed or disagreed. They could not even guess what Hongjun thought the success rate of such a lineup going to the Tianwu world. Chapter 1098. Lin Yuan, who had returned to the prince's mansion in the northern frontier, paused for a moment and turned his eyes to the main hall. A young man in a blood-red robe was sitting on the main seat, leisurely sipping a cup of tea. Many servants were busy cleaning and other miscellaneous things around him. The guards of the prince's mansion were also patrolling and guarding. However, no one looked at the young man in the blood-red robe. It was as if no one had seen him at all. However, Lin Yuan only glanced at him and felt a chill crawling up his back. There was no way to describe that kind of chill because his whole body was numb. Even Lin Yuan's posture of staring at the young man in the red robe froze, as if he had turned into a statue. Nice to meet you, Lin Yuan. The young man in the red robe narrowed his eyes slightly and put down the teacup in his hand. He smiled and said, I am the virtuous corpse doppelganger of sect leader Tong Tian. You can call me Shangqing Heavenly Lord, or you can call me by my title. Hearing the young man in the red robe call himself, Lin Yuan only felt his scalp tingle. According to the myths and records in his previous life, sect leader Tong Tian disappeared after the investiture of gods. However, as the winner, the Grand Supreme, had an incarnation in the heavenly court. As the loser, sect leader Tong Tian naturally had an incarnation in the heavenly court, and it was Shangqing Heavenly Lord Ling Bao. However, there were not many records about Shangqing Heavenly Lord Ling Bao, but from the few records that there were, it could be seen that the Jade Emperor Zhang Bairen, who was supported by the Grand Supreme, respected Shangqing Heavenly Lord Ling Bao very much, even as much as the Grand Supreme. After all, the investiture of gods was not an ordinary thing. Even if a sage died in the tribulation, his name would be on the list. It was just that the restriction on the sage was not as strong as that on ordinary immortals. The young man in the red robe, who called himself Shangqing Heavenly Lord, was undoubtedly one of the three incarnations of sect leader Tong Tian. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Then, he said in a deep voice, "Sect leader Tong Tian, your name is like thunder in my ears. It's my honor to have you visit my humble abode." Shangqing Heavenly Lord squinted his eyes and sized up Lin Yuan. Suddenly, he laughed and said, "I have always believed in education without discrimination. If you were born in the untainted land, you would be the one who carried the tripod of the Order of Jia. But it's fine now. You are not ambitious, but you are born with pride. You will never submit to others and will do anything to achieve your goal. If you enter the Order of Jia, no matter you or I, we will not be at ease." When he spoke up to hear, there seemed to be a look of regret in his eyes, but it was only for an instant, and he quickly said seriously, "I didn't come here to demonstrate my strength to you or anything else. I just came to give you a reminder. In a few days, there will probably be experts from the primeval world descending here. I don't need to explain their purpose to you, right?" Lin Yuan thought for a moment and his face darkened. He said, "Thank you for your reminder, Senior. Chen Qi, Jingluan of the Western Order. Well, just these two names may be hard for you to understand. But if I were to say the two generals Hang and Ha, you should know who they are, right? This time, the two generals Hang and Ha will attract your attention from the front, but the one in the dark is the one who will kill you. You have to be careful. Even the Western Order has suffered losses from him." "Haha, I'm going." Shangqing Heavenly Lord laughed and his body burst like a bubble, dissipating into nothingness. Only Lin Yuan was left standing in the same place with a solemn face. For a moment, hundreds of thoughts were running through his mind. The Western Order was notorious in Lin Yuan's eyes. What these two guys did in the untainted land was enough to be called the most shameless. Usually, they were the ones who suffered losses from others. Suddenly, Lin Yuan guessed who they had suffered losses from, but Lin Yuan had no clue at all. Shangqing Heavenly Lord obviously came with bad intentions. He came here to tell Lin Yuan that an expert from the untainted land would come to the Tianwu world to kill him in the near future. He even pointed out that the two generals Hang and Ha were just a cover on the surface. The real killer was someone else in the dark, but he didn't tell Lin Yuan the real identity of the killer. At that time, Lin Yuan would be apprehensive about the killer in the dark. Maybe he would be killed by the two generals Hang and Ha before the other party could make a move. Although the two generals Hang and Ha appeared as funny figures in most myths and legends, even during the time of King Wu's conquest of the Zhou dynasty, the two of them belonged to different camps. Their mounts, appearances, secret techniques, and martial arts were almost the same. They were in a deadlock and both of them used the soul-sucking secret technique. In the end, both of them fell from their horses at the same time and were rescued by their subordinates. Even those who were watching the battle were amused. But back to the main topic, the two generals Hang and Ha were definitely the strongest in the untainted land. Take Daoist Red Cloud and Demon Master Kuanpeng as an example. Because Daoist Red Cloud beat Kuanpeng at his own game, Demon Master Kuanpeng also lost his sage position. After that, he wanted to kill Daoist Red Cloud, but he only destroyed Daoist Red Cloud's physical body. Although he had the protection of the 99 Red Cloud soul-scattering gourd, it could be seen that most of the creatures in the untainted land only destroyed the physical body and couldn't hurt the primordial spirit. However, if the primordial spirit wasn't destroyed, it could be reincarnated. But the two generals Hang and Ha, who were the mountain guardians of the Western sect, used the soul-sucking secret technique. They were definitely not ordinary people when they attacked. After all, the two generals of the Western sect had done many shameless things. No one knew how many people they had cheated to join the Western sect. Other than that, they had also cheated countless treasures to fill the Western sect's storehouse. The fact that the two generals Hang and Ha could be conferred as the mountain guardians of the Western sect after their death and were responsible for guarding the treasures proved their terrifying strength. Taking a step back, an existence who could make the two generals Hang and Ha cover for him while he hid in the dark and waited for an opportunity to kill was probably more difficult to deal with than the two generals Hang and Ha. Either this guy was extremely good at assassination and instant killing, or his strength was above that of the two generals Hang and Ha. It seemed that the last time Hongjuan's projection descended, he was attacked by the system and the will of the world. He had suffered a lot, but he also saw the drawbacks of this protection. If the attacker's strength was similar to that of Lin Yuan, then neither the system nor the will of the world would attack. Only the sudden attack of an existence like Hongjun, whose strength was far above that of Lin Yuan, could make the two bosses activate and fight. However, he would deal with whatever came his way. Since the untainted land had attacked, there was naturally no reason for him to sit and wait for death. Lin Yuan thought for a moment, then he rose again and flew in the direction of the endless sea. Although he was the emperor of the underworld in the Tianwu world, after all, he had not formed the underworld. He was not familiar with the secret techniques that targeted the soul. Instead of directly fighting the two generals Hang and Ha, it was better to find someone to borrow a treasure to fight. Of course, it would be better if he could ask that person to attack directly. Anyway, in the untainted land, borrowing treasures to fight the enemy or asking for help could be said to be basic. He just did not know how much he would have to pay this time to satisfy that person's appetite. Chapter 1099. After leaving the prince's mansion in the northern frontier, Shangqing Heavenly Lord's face suddenly darkened. Of course, he knew who was responsible for the assassination of Lin Yuan. Strictly speaking, there was still a deep hatred between him and the assassin. During the investiture of God's tribulation, the old man who received the guide subdued the saintess of Turtle Spirit and wanted to persuade her to join the Western religious sect. However, the saintess of Turtle Spirit was one of the 4 disciples of Tong Tian. Although she was impatient and impulsive, she was straightforward and was favored by Tong Tian. She could be considered loyal to the Jia sect and was completely different from the traitor Ding Guangxian. After all, when Guang Qingzi visited the Aquamarine Palace 3 times and intended to stir up a dispute, his impatient disciple did not restrain herself and attacked. Not only was she defeated by the flipping sky seal and was beaten out of her original form, she also implicated a group of fellow disciples. It could be said that a large part of the reason why the Jia sect faced the tribulation was because of the impulsiveness of the saintess of Turtle Spirit. Therefore, Tong Tian, who was furious, expelled the saintess of Turtle Spirit from the palace and did not allow her to enter the palace to listen to lectures. However, in the 2 battles of the Immortal Slaying Formation and the Myriad Immortal Formation, the saintess of Turtle Spirit still followed Tong Tian without hesitation. In the end, she was defeated by Zhu Lu Sun in the Myriad Immortal Formation. When she chased to the west, she met the shameless old man who received the guide who bullied the weak. Finally, she was killed by Mosquito Daoren and became an empty shell. Although he was annoyed by the impulsiveness of the saintess of Turtle Spirit, Tong Tian still felt guilty for this disciple. Mosquito Daoren, Shangqing Heavenly Lord's eyes flashed with anger as he gently chewed on the name. He murmured, "You must not die in the hands of the Black Jiao so easily." I still have a score to settle with you. At the same time, in the untainted world. Above the heavenly court, outside the 33rd heaven, a young man in a blood-red robe and black shirt knelt outside the Tushita palace with a solemn expression. The young man looked to be at most 26 or 27 years old. His skin was fair, his face was like jade, and his facial features could be considered exquisite. However, he had an extremely long nose, which made his facial features look extremely out of place, greatly destroying the first impression he gave others. He was not famous in the untainted land, but his achievements were amazing. Back then, the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit defeated several golden immortals of Kunlun in the 10,000 Immortals formation. Even the 12 golden immortals of the Chan sect, Ju Lu Sun, was defeated by him and was chased by the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit all the way to the west. Although it was Jia Yin who suppressed the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit, the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit still died in his hands. Don't think that it was easy to kill the suppressed Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit. It should be known that the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit was originally a 10,000-year-old spirit turtle. She inherited the word Sang Jia created, and when the turtle script had the shape of wings, she turned into a human form. She could be said to be a powerful figure in the period of the Yen Emperor. She also inherited a part of the merit and luck. After killing the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit, he went to the Western Paradise under the order of his teacher and bit the 12-grade lotus seed of Jiayin, causing it to become a 9-grade lotus seed. This directly caused the prosperity of Buddhism to be delayed by 1,000 years, giving his teacher the opportunity and time to transform into a Buddha. After that, he followed his teacher's order and had been cultivating in seclusion, never leaving his own cave. That was why there were few mosquito Daoren in the world. However, he had never expected that the old bastard would be so shameless. In order to take revenge, he actually recommended him to Hong Jun and asked him to go to the small Kiliacosm to assassinate the Black Jiao. He even did not hesitate to push out the 2 mountain gods of Shur sect to help him and cut off his retreat. It could be said that it was an opportunity for Generals Hang and Ha to go to the small Kiliacosm to kill the Black Jiao. Although Generals Hang and Ha belonged to 2 camps during the period of King Wu's attack, they were under the jurisdiction of the Western sect after they became gods. They had always been in charge of guarding the Western sect and had never offended any mighty figures or people with deep foundations. As long as they were not killed by the Black Jiao on this trip, if the matter failed, they could blame it on him for the assassination. If the matter succeeded, they would naturally have a share of the credit. On the other hand, although his teacher was still a heavenly sage in the untainted world, it was true that Sanqing joined hands to plot against Hong Jun. Although Tong Tian had left the untainted world for many years, he was still in contact with his teacher and Uncle Master Yuanshi. Therefore, Mosquito Daoren naturally knew that the good corpse clone of Tong Tian, Lord Shangqing, was in that small Kiliacosm at the moment. This also meant that it was an opportunity for others to do this task. No matter whether they succeeded or failed, they would be rewarded by the Tao ancestor. However, if he went to that small Kiliacosm, once he fell into the hands of Lord Shangqing, he would really be unable to live or die. In the entire untainted world, there was really no one who was more protective than Tong Tian. Although Sanqing was acting in the war between the 3 sects, Tong Tian's intention to stand up for his disciple could not be faked at all. Although the matter between the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit and Guang Qingzi had caused the entire Jia sect to be tainted with the aura of calamity, the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit was loyal to Tong Tian. Even the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit was suppressed by Daoist Jia Yin because Tong Tian shouted in the 10,000 Immortals formation, "Quickly bring me Ju Lu's son." Even when facing a mighty figure like Daoist Jia Yin, who was on the same level as Grandmaster Tong Tian, the goddess of Turtle Spirit did not retreat at all. She loyally carried out Grandmaster Tong Tian's orders, which led to the disaster later. According to his understanding of Tong Tian, if he fell into his hands, even his teacher could not get him back. Therefore, Mosquito Doran's only purpose in coming to the Tushita Palace was to ask his teacher to protect him on account of his loyalty to his teacher, so that he would not go to that small kiliacosm where there was no chance of survival. However, what made him despair was that he had been kneeling outside the Tushita Palace for 12 hours. Corresponding to the time in the mortal world, he could be said to have been kneeling here for a year, but his teacher had no intention of showing up. The gate of the Tushita Palace was tightly shut, and he could not even see a Daoist child. It was clear that he had acquiesced in this matter. Mosquito Doran lamented in his heart. Suddenly, he kowtowed twice and said in a sorrowful voice, "I know that teacher is in a difficult position. Since teacher is unwilling to show up, I will not force you. After this farewell, I don't know if I will still have the fate to serve teacher. I only hope that teacher can fulfill his wish as soon as possible. I will leave now." After Mosquito Doran finished kowtowing and stood up, he turned into a blood-winged black mosquito and flew into the sky. Only then did a faint sigh come from the Tushita Palace. Karma is the most difficult thing in the world to return. The cause of the past is the effect of today. So what if you can avoid this calamity? It is the end of the calamity. A calm voice rang out. It seemed to have penetrated time and space and directly exploded in Mosquito Doran's mind. Chapter 1100. Returning to the timeline of the Tianwu world. It had been 3 months since he met the Shangqing Skylord. In these 3 months, Lin Yuan had been paying attention to the movements of the Gate of Heaven. However, the strange thing was that other than the cultivators and demonic beasts guarding the Gate of Heaven, Lin Yuan's eye of God could not see anything strange at all. Not to mention the experts from the Eldritch world, even the Sky Demon, who had been continuously entering the Tianwu world, could not be seen. This did not make sense and was impossible. It was still unknown whether the 2 fox demons had entered the Tianwu world through the Gate of Heaven. However, they were backed by the patriarch Yang Mei, who had attained the great Tao of space. He was a fierce man who could fight head-on with Hong Jun, who had merged with the heavenly Tao. If such an existence wanted to open a crack in space and send in 2 demonic king-level fox demons, it would be extremely easy. However, other than the patriarch Yang Mei, there were not many existences in the Eldritch world who could play with space to perfection. Especially now that the patriarch Yang Mei was in the sea of bitterness outside the Gate of Heaven, who would dare to play with space in front of the patriarch Yang Mei and send in Generals Hang, Ha and the unknown assassin. Whether it was Generals Hang, Ha or the assassin, if they wanted to enter the Tianwu world, the only way was through the Gate of Heaven. To put it bluntly, if they had obediently entered the Heaven Martial world through the Gate of Heaven, it would have been fine. Although old ancestor Yang Mei and Hong Jun were not on good terms, he would still give Hong Jun some face. He would not have killed a few juniors. However, if they thought the patriarch Yang Mei was a fool and wanted to enter the Tianwu world through the Gate of Heaven, then sorry, the patriarch Yang Mei did not even need to do anything. He just needed to casually tamper with the space, and Generals Hang, Ha, and the assassin would not even know how they died. However, it had already been 3 months. There was no movement at all. It couldn't be that the Shangqing Heavenly Lord was so bored that he was making fun of him, right? However, regardless of whether Generals Hang, Ha, and the assassin would come or not, today was an important day. The youths who had been gathered by Lin Yuan to impart the Sutra of all living beings and then sent to the various worlds for training would return today. Although he could sense the actions of these youths through the universal scripture, Lin Yuan had never done so, nor did he give them any mission objectives. He only borrowed the power of the system to send them to the myriad worlds to train for 3 months, and when the time was up, he would bring them back through the system. As for how many of them he would be able to return, it was still unknown. The myriad worlds were not some blessed enclave. Lin Yuan wasn't the master god of the infinite style, nor was he the director of an orphanage. He couldn't decide which world these youths would go to, nor could he give them any cheat. The only thing he could give them was a cultivation method of the all-being scripture that suited them. However, with a suitable cultivation method, after going to the myriad worlds, it didn't mean that they would definitely become cultivators. The myriad worlds was just a general term. Other than the Tianwu world and the chaotic world, there was also the world of his previous life that had already entered the age of Dharma's end. There wasn't the slightest bit of spiritual chi between heaven and earth, and there were also worlds that were completely unsuitable for life forms to live in. To put it bluntly, many of these youths who were sent to the myriad worlds were unlucky, and died as soon as they arrived in other worlds. There were also some who wasted 3 whole months without any progress in their cultivation, and were instead assimilated by the age of Dharma's end, causing their aptitude to be damaged. A milky white screen of light unfolded in front of him. One by one, the youths who seemed familiar stepped out of it. After the screen of light dissipated, Lin Yuan confirmed that out of the 217 youths, only 140 had returned safely. Of these 140 youths, another 30 had been affected by the age of Dharma's end. Originally, they could be considered to have excellent aptitude, but now, they could only be described as mediocre. However, other than these unlucky youths, there were also a few youths who made Lin Yuan's eyes light up. One of them was dressed like a Daoist, but from his cloth to his Daoist robe, everything was pitch black. Lin Yuan couldn't sense the aura of a living person from his body, but the netherworld energy in his body was very close to him. It was very clear that this youth had obtained some ghost Dao inheritance. If he didn't die unexpectedly, once the world was repaired, he would become the Tianwu world's first batch of underworld gods. One of them was dressed in grey monk robes. His face still had a bit of childishness, but it was completely different from the white and clean appearance in Lin Yuan's memories. Now, his skin was a healthy bronze color. Even from a distance, Lin Yuan could feel the powerful qi and blood on his body. It was clear that he had entered a high cultivation world and obtained some Buddhist inheritance, cultivating some Vajra unbreakable cultivation method. There was also a youth who was dressed similarly to when he had left, but his aura had clearly changed. Furthermore, his body was filled with a faint medicinal fragrance. On his back was a small bag with a golden pill furnace. It seemed that he had obtained some kind of pill Dao inheritance. Just like how the all-life scripture would present different contents to different individuals, even the all-life scripture that had been recorded down would change according to the cultivator. Once this mystical cultivation technique was cultivated, it would constantly adjust itself, changing its contents according to the growth of the host. It would never be outdated no matter what time it was. Lin Yuan's gaze swept across these 140 youths, and he said in a deep voice, "Although I don't know what you have experienced during this period of time, the fact that you are able to come back alive means that this period of training has been successful. Next, you will have about a month's holiday. You can do whatever you want to do. After a month, gather here again, and I will start the second training for you. I hope that next time, I will still be able to see each and every one of you." At this point, he turned his gaze to Kagura, who was waiting at the side, and said indifferently, "Choose a substitute from the reserve force to receive my inheritance. Replenish the 217 people. After a month, we will set off together with them." "Yes." Kagura lowered her head slightly and responded in a deep voice. However, Lin Yuan slowly turned his head and cast his gaze in the direction of the divine gate. He smiled coldly and said, "You're finally here. I thought that person was really using me to make fun of me." At this point, he turned his head to look at the youths who had returned, and changed the topic. "Coming at the right time is better than coming at the right time. All of you, follow me. I will let you see how the realm that you will at least reach in the future fights." Chapter 11:01. On the other side. Generals Heng and Ha, who had just arrived in the martial heaven realm, had gloomy expressions. They looked at the heaven gate guardians around them and were at a loss. The two sides were in a strange stalemate. After all, even though they knew beforehand that this was a minor world, they'd never imagined that the environment here would be so bad. The spirit energy of the heavens and the earth was already scarce to a certain extent. They didn't even doubt that if they were to cultivate in this world for half a year, their cultivations would probably regress instead of advancing. Moreover, why were the cultivators of this world so strange? Generals Hang and Ha had also suppressed their cultivation to the limits of the Tianwu world. The surrounding monsters and cultivators were more or less at the same level, but if they really fought, they would be able to easily kill most of them without using a soul-sucking secret technique. But the problem was, they were panicking. The universe was a boundless battlefield. Starting from the middle thousand realms, countless experts went on expeditions to other realms. The various realms and the bitter sea were all battlefields. However, the carrying capacity of a minor dimension was limited. The resources were also limited. Therefore, they weren't disturbed. Even if someone found a minor dimension, they would only leave a coordinate and let it grow. After all, a fruit that wasn't ripe wasn't delicious. But this minor dimension, it obviously didn't participate in the war of the universe, but it was hostile to cultivators from other realms. This was something that they didn't expect before coming here. A minor dimension resisting cultivators from other realms. What a joke. Even in the cruel 10,000 realm battlefield, the flames of war wouldn't be brought to a minor dimension. If powerful beings from other realms went to a minor dimension, they would bring a lot of knowledge, technology, cultivation methods, seeds, precious beast bloodlines, and so on. For the powerful life forms from other worlds, the small Kiliacosm couldn't wait to welcome them. How could it be like now? They didn't even say a word, and directly surrounded him with covetous eyes, as if they wanted to start a fight immediately. But even if they didn't agree, they should at least say something. The two of them were natives of the Great Desolate Realm. Even if they could imitate and translate languages, they still needed the other party to speak first before they could use it. The atmosphere was getting heavier and heavier. At this time, a muffled voice was heard. It was like a thunderclap in a clear sky. Everyone was startled and shivered. "Seniors, please take a rest. These two are here to cause trouble for me. I'll take care of them." Lin Yuan's voice came from the void. He stared at Generals Hang and Ha with his heterochromatic eyes. He slowly switched from the common language of the Tianwu world to the ancient Chinese of his previous world, which he had not used for a long time. He said, "I didn't expect that I would be able to alarm Generals Qin Qi and Jing Luan to come together. Can I have a word with you?" "Humph. Ha." Generals Hang and Ha didn't know how Lin Yuan knew their names and origins, but when they saw their target swaggering in front of them, their bodies reacted faster than their minds. They used the soul-sucking mystic skill almost at the same time. Obviously, they planned to destroy Lin Yuan's soul the moment he appeared. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. When he saw the yellow and white chi coming towards him, he didn't look surprised at all. He just shook his head slightly. A red light appeared out of nowhere and turned into a red gourd. The moment it appeared, it grew with the wind. In the blink of an eye, it became a huge gourd more than 100 feet wide. Then, endless red sand flew out of the gourd and collided with the yellow and white chi. When Generals Hang and Ha saw the red gourd, their expressions changed and they panicked. They were existences that were adept at attacking the soul to begin with, so they naturally wouldn't fail to recognize this infamous connate spirit treasure. When the untainted world was created, there was a primordial spiritual root gourd vine at the foot of Mount Buzhou. There were 7 primordial spiritual treasures: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple. These 7 primordial spiritual treasures were refined into several famous treasures. They were Taoist Red Cloud Soul-Dispersing Gourd, Taoist Luya's Immortal-Killing Flying Dagger, Goddess Nuo's Demon Summoning Gourd, and Laozi's Purple Gold Gourd. The other 3 gourds were not famous, but they were obtained by sect leader Tong Tian, Heavenly Lord Yuanshi, and Taoist Hongjun respectively. Moreover, the primordial spiritual root gourd vine was used to create humans by goddess Nuo. In the end, it turned into a treasure of merit. The 7 gourds it produced naturally shared some of the merit power, making them more powerful. Although goddess Nuo was a great saint of the demon clan, she was also the holy mother of the human clan. The reason why she could command all the demons in the world was mainly because of the demon summoning gourd in her hand. As for Taoist Luya's immortal killing flying dagger, it was even more outrageous. When he said, "Treasure, please turn around," it could be said that except for a few people, all the others who were targeted by Luya were doomed to die. However, among the 7 gourds, the most vicious one was Taoist Red Cloud's soul-dispersing gourd. Without injecting magic power into it, this red gourd looked only 3 feet and 3 inches in size, but it contained an endless amount of soul-dispersing red sand. Once the soul-dispersing gourd was used, the red sand would cover the sky and earth. Anyone who touched it would be destroyed in body and soul under the golden immortal of the great all-embracing heaven. They would not even be able to enter the reincarnation cycle. What surprised Generals Heng and Ha the most was that they recognized this treasure. After all, Taoist Red Cloud's physical body had been destroyed by the demon master Kuinpeng. Even if he could refine it again after countless years, his skills would definitely be reduced to less than 10%. This soul-dispersing gourd could be said to be Taoist Red Cloud's lifeblood. Without the protection of this treasure, Taoist Red Cloud would definitely be doomed if he was targeted by a powerful enemy. How did this Black Jiao get this soul-dispersing gourd? Did he borrow it? Or, was Taoist Red Cloud dead? Humph. Ha. Generals Heng and Ha continued to use the soul-absorbing mystic technique, blasting out yellow and white qi to fight against the soul-dispersing red sand. They had no intention of retreating. However, this is also normal. After all, they are all big shots who have been famous for many years, and they are good at hurting people's souls. If the one who used the 99 soul-scattering gourd here was Red Cloud, they might be a little afraid. However, if the opponent was Lin Yuan, they would never admit defeat so easily. More importantly, Lin Yuan squinted his eyes slightly and opened his eye of God, paying attention to every movement around him. He did not dare to be careless. After all, the mysterious assassin had not shown up yet. Now that he had used the soul-dispersing gourd to fight with Generals Heng and Ha, it would be difficult to find a more suitable opportunity to assassinate him. If the assassin was here, he would definitely not miss this opportunity. Chapter 1102. Generals Heng and Ha looked at each other and continued to use the soul-sucking secret technique, but their eyes were more serious than before. After all, they came from the great thousand worlds of the primitive era. Suddenly coming to a small thousand world with such a lack of spiritual qi, they were not used to it. The difference in the density of spiritual qi between the two worlds was so great that it even affected their strength to a certain extent. The efficiency of their spiritual qi recovery was so low that it made their hair stand on end. How great was the gap between them? For example, if the least talented human in the Tianwu world were to come to the primitive era, they would be able to step onto the path of cultivation with just a few breaths. The most annoying thing was that Generals Heng and Ha did not dare to wantonly absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth in this small thousand world. Even if their cultivation method could convert all the spiritual qi of heaven and earth into spiritual qi, there was a huge difference between converting immortal qi and converting air. If they were to freely absorb the spiritual qi of Tianwu world, it was hard to say whether they could quickly recover their spiritual qi, but it was certain that it would not be long before the spiritual qi that they had painstakingly cultivated would be contaminated by the inferior spiritual qi. In the worst-case scenario, it could even harm their foundation. In the worst-case scenario, it would cost them thousands of years of cultivation. But Black Jiao was different. This Black Jiao had grown up in such a small thousand world. The quality of his spiritual qi was inferior, but it did not need to be that high to use spiritual chi to fight against enemies. After all, spiritual chi could strengthen spiritual chi to a certain extent, but spiritual chi always had a basic lower limit. The Khanate gourd was nurtured by the Khanate gourd vine, and it had been nurtured by an expert like Taoist Red Cloud for countless years. Even if its lower limit was low, how low could it be? Most importantly, the ninefold soul scatter gourd was a precious treasure that targeted the soul as well, and it was on par with their soul assimilation secret techniques in essence. If it was only the two of them fighting the Black Wirm, then they would sooner or later be completely exhausted of their energy and be at the mercy of the Black Wirm. Fortunately, in 2 breaths of time, Lin Yuan suddenly felt a gust of wind coming from behind him. Almost without thinking, he swung his flood dragon body and moved nearly 1,000 meters forward. Only now did Generals Hang and Ha's expressions gradually stiffen. Although they didn't manage to get the upper hand against the Black Jiao in the beginning, they were only here to provide cover. There was no need for them to fight to the death with the Black Jiao. As long as they could keep the Black Jiao here and ensure that the Black Jiao's attention was focused on them, their mission would be considered complete. Whether they could kill the Black Jiao or not depended on the mysterious Mosquito Daoran. But the question was, why was it like this? Why did Black Jiao seem to have known about Mosquito Doran's existence and avoided it in advance? And during this process, Black Jiao didn't relax his control of the 99 soul-dissipating gourd at all. Even though he was multitasking, he was still able to suppress the 2 brothers. This undoubtedly showed that Black Jiao wasn't serious at all. Fellow Taoist Mosquito, the 99 soul-dissipating gourd is a primordial spiritual treasure with the power of merit. Even if the Black Jiao is extraordinarily talented, he can't control the magic treasure and use divine sense at the same time. We'll hold him back. You can go all out to show off your power. Chen Qi's eyes flashed coldly. He raised his hands, took out the demon-slaying pestle that had accompanied him for many years, and smashed it fiercely at the 99 soul-dissipating gourd in mid-air. After all, Xingluan was one of the generals Hang and Ha. Although they belonged to different camps at the beginning, they were both worshipped as the mountain guardians of the Western sect after they became gods. In addition, their divine sense and cultivation methods were similar. Over the years, they lived and ate together, and their relationship was even deeper than that of blood-related brothers. Even if they didn't communicate when they fought together, they were in a state of tacit understanding. Therefore, the moment Chen Qi spoke, Xingluan had already begun to increase the output of his Dharma power. The white smoke coming out of his nose became thicker and thicker. He was going to fight the primordial spiritual treasure, the 99 soul-dissipating gourd, by himself. The Western sect has always been shameless. It's normal for the 3 of you to fight against one. Lin Yuan sneered while dodging the danger that could not be seen with the naked eye, but he could feel the danger. In the untainted land, there were many cultivators who put their cultivation on magic treasures. Even many powerful figures did so. Most of them had acquired spiritual treasures or even self-refined magic treasures. But the 99 soul-dissipating gourd was different. First, it was a primordial spiritual treasure stained with the power of merits. If Lin Yuan wanted to control it freely, he had to constantly pour in a large amount of demonic power to control it. Under such circumstances, Lin Yuan had to consider whether his demonic power was sufficient when he wanted to use some divine sense and magic arts, let alone control many magic treasures. After all, he was not so extravagant as to waste the power of incense here. Second, the 99 soul-dissipating gourd was originally Taoist Red Cloud's treasure. As mentioned before, most treasures had inhibition formations. The more inhibition formations were refined, the more power could be exerted. However, the 99 soul-dissipating gourd was borrowed. Lin Yuan couldn't refine all the inhibition formations on it, could he? Even if he could do it, Taoist Red Cloud would not agree to it. After all, refining all the seals was equivalent to erasing Taoist Red Cloud's ownership of the Khanate's spiritual treasure. Therefore, even at his limit, he could only refine 40% of the seals at most. What was more, Lin Yuan couldn't do that. How could he refine a primordial spiritual treasure in 3 months? Did Taoist Red Cloud really think he was on the same level as Hongjun? Not to mention the 99 soul-dissipating gourd, which was Taoist Red Cloud's personal treasure. Even a post-celestial spiritual treasure would need to be nurtured for countless years. Unless one had the strength to crush the opponent, refining a treasure would take at least 80 to 100 years. Now, there was an expert hiding in the dark who kept attacking him. He must have known that Qin didn't have the strength to fight back. Moreover, Xingluan was attacking the 99 soul-dissipating gourd without caring about the consumption of energy. This meant that Lin Yuan couldn't relax his control over the 99 soul-dissipating gourd. Otherwise, he would lose this primordial spiritual treasure that could suppress Qin and Xingluan. He wasn't confident that he could deal with their soul-absorbing secret skill. At this moment, Qin stopped using the secret skill and took out the demon-slaying pestle. He didn't want Xingluan to bear all the pressure. Instead, he wanted to attack the 99 soul-dissipating gourd directly, in an attempt to destroy or knock down this primordial spiritual treasure. It was a standard 3-on-1 battle. Moreover, they had Lin Yuan under control. He could only watch anxiously but couldn't do anything about it. Apart from the Western sect, there weren't many who dared to use such a shameless way of fighting. After all, the cultivators of the Celestial Sect of Wonders also cared about their reputation. Chapter 1103. Fortunately, the one who controls the 99 soul-scattering gourd has never been me. Lin Yuan's joking voice suddenly sounded. At the same time, the flood dragon's tail swung fiercely. Endless black water from the netherworld sprayed out and turned into a roaring black flood dragon. It kept biting the void, intending to force out the assassin who was hiding in the dark to attack him. Mosquito Daoran, who was hiding in the void, was shocked. Although he did not know why the Black Jiao could locate him, he still subconsciously retreated in the face of the Black Jiao formed by the liquid with dense netherworld aura. As he retreated, he immediately revealed his figure from the void. Very few people knew that Mosquito Daoran actually cultivated the Great Way of Space. Otherwise, Mosquito Daoran would not have been able to hide beside White Lotus Boy without being discovered by Daoist Jiayin. After killing the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit, he would not have been able to fly to the Western Paradise and absorb the level 3 Dharma power of the 12 Lotus Seats. After all, Daoist Jiayin and Daoist Jundi were Heavenly Way sages. Except for Tao ancestor Hongjun, who was in harmony with the Way of Heaven, they could almost be said to be invincible. Even if a few existences whose fighting capacity was not inferior to theirs appeared, they could not be compared with the invincible sages. If they really made a deadly enemy, they would be tortured to death sooner or later. However, except for some foreign species, Heavenly Way sages could be said to be supreme in all aspects in untainted land. If Mosquito Daoran did not cultivate the Great Way of Space, not to mention hiding his figure, his basic speed would be far inferior to that of Heavenly Way sages. In the web novels of Lin Yuan's previous life, there was a very reasonable sentence: if space does not appear, time is king. Although 3,000 of the 3,000 Grand Daos was only a quantifier to describe a large number of Grand Daos and not an exact number, these Grand Daos still had their differences. For example, the Grand Daos of space, time, fate, karma, and so on were definitely much stronger than the basic Grand Daos of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Of course, the specific strength depended on the user. For example, Pangu's Great Tao of Strength was not as powerful as the Great Tao of Time and Space. However, Pangu's Great Tao of Strength was deep enough to shatter any time and space with a single punch. Otherwise, the prehistorical world would not have become a great world as soon as it was created. If the basic great Daos of the 5 elements were used well, they could also crush the more powerful great Daos. After all, the foundation was the foundation, but the more powerful great Daos were not so easy to comprehend. The prehistorical world had never lacked talented people, and there were also many people who practiced top great Daos. However, the difference between walking 1 meter and walking 2 meters was like heaven and earth. There were definitely many experts who practiced the great Tao of time and space in the prehistorical world, but most of them were like brothers among brothers. Mosquito Daoran believed that his attainments in the great Tao of space were not bad. In the entire prehistorical world, only Patriarch Yang Mei, an extremely special existence, could surpass him in the great Tao of space. But this black Jiao, Mosquito Daoran, could not find the slightest aura of the great Tao of space. This black Jiao had not even comprehended its own Tao. Even if it wanted to prove its own great Tao in the future, it would basically be in the direction of the netherworld or the ghost Tao. Under such circumstances, it was simply too strange for it to be able to discover him. Although Lin Yuan did not know the doubts in Mosquito Doran's heart, even if he knew, he would not take it seriously. There was a path to heaven, but you did not take it, and there was no door to hell. Of all the places to play with the great Tao of space, why did you come to the Tianwu world to show off your existence? The ancestors who played with the great Tao of space in the prehistorical world were in the sea of misery outside the heavenly gate. He still had the willow branch that Patriarch Yang Mei had given him. Even if he could not comprehend the great Tao of space in the future, ordinary great Tao of space cultivators would not be able to hide in front of him. The dark water black Jiao swung its tail again. Boom! The void shattered, and heaven and earth shook. Mosquito Doran's expression changed again and again, and he retreated again and again. The problem he was facing now was equally awkward. After all, he cultivated the great Tao of space, and his main divine powers relied on the great Tao of space to perform. However, he did not know why the black Jiao could not only accurately locate his position, but even the divine powers that he stored in the void that could break space at any time were as transparent as if they were transparent. Before he used the divine powers, they would dodge. Even if he hit it, it would only be a superficial wound, and could not cause any effective damage. More importantly, he was an existence that had comprehended his own great Tao. Although he had not become a saint, he was much stronger than Generals Heng and Ha. When he came to this small world, he had already suppressed his cultivation, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was not suitable for him. Moreover, after using the great Tao of space, he had been regarded as an alien by the will of this small world, and he constantly felt a repulsive force. Even if he could forcibly suppress this repulsive force, it was not a long-term solution. The repulsive force of the will of the world was not unfamiliar to him. When he followed his teacher's order to plot against the Western sect, Daoist Kandi and Daoist Jia-yin also used a similar method. If it was not for his teacher's protection, he would have been killed long ago. 30 minutes. At most, it would take him 30 minutes. If he did not leave this world, who knew what kind of monster the will of this world would create to deal with him? Taking a step back, even if the cultivators and demonic beasts of Tianwu world were not his opponents, if the will of the world revealed his whereabouts to the incarnation of Tong Tian's sect leader, he would not be able to escape death. Mosquito Daoran put his palms together. When he opened them again, a large number of blood-winged black mosquitoes flew out from his palms and whizzed toward the black Jiao. At the same time, he thought to himself, I have to get rid of this black Jiao as soon as possible. These blood-winged black mosquitoes were his children, but they did not have their own will. At most, they were puppets, but they were extremely powerful. Once released, no matter what kind of existence the opponent was, they could bite them to death, and absorb their flesh, blood, essence, and dharma power completely. During the investiture of the gods' cataclysm, Mosquito Daoran used these blood-winged black mosquitoes to kill the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit and absorb enough power to use the Great Tao of Space. With a flap of his wings, he arrived at the western pure land of ultimate bliss. Even the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit, who was in the form of a 10,000-year black tortoise, could not withstand the bites of these blood-winged black mosquitoes. Even the White Lotus Boy, who was in charge of capturing the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit, could not do anything to these blood-winged black mosquitoes. This proved the power of Mosquito Doran's technique. Ridiculous. Lin Yuan's blue and white eyes flashed coldly. Previously, he was not sure who his opponent was, but after seeing these blood-winged black mosquitoes, if he still could not guess his opponent's identity, then he was too stupid. Chapter 1105. Pfft. Mosquito Doran sneered when he saw Lin Yuan control the nether water black Jiao to transform into a human. Then, he sneered at Lin Yuan, "Black Jiao, do you only have these two abilities?" Although he said that, Mosquito Doran's eyes clearly flashed with wariness. After all, he knew himself best. He was a blood-winged black mosquito, one of the 5 most ferocious insects of primordial chaos. He was born as a mutant and naturally had the abilities of a mutant. For example, his mouth part was said to be able to break and absorb everything. Ordinary magic treasures would be damaged after 2 or 3 hits when they collided with his mouth part unless it was a treasure on the level of the Xianhuang Pagoda of heaven and earth. After all, it was a divine item that was said to be invincible once it was used. He could do nothing about it. However, other treasures like the 12 lotus platforms would not fare well against his mouth part. However, the black liquid controlled by the black Jiao could be said to be his greatest nemesis. It was hard to say if he would be able to defeat the black humanoid if he used his mouth part as a black spear to clash head-on with that black humanoid. If he did, wouldn't he be afraid that he wouldn't die quickly enough if he ended up sucking in an existence similar to the water of the Styx? Blood-winged black mosquito, another name is bloodthirsty black mosquito. Am I right? Lin Yuan's main body narrowed his eyes and sneered, "Why are you pretending to be afraid of the nether water? If I remember correctly, you were born from the nether blood sea. You are one of the 2 connate life forms born from the nether blood sea's origin. The other connate life form is the nether river patriarch, who is said to be, I will not die as long as the blood sea does not dry up." When he spoke up to this point, he paused and teased, "Let me guess. Are you thinking about how many moves you will need to kill me? Otherwise, you will find a chance to suck in 2 mouthfuls of nether realm black water and pretend to be heavily injured and weak to lure me over and kill me in one blow?" Humph. Mosquito Doran snorted coldly and did not answer Lin Yuan's question directly. Instead, he said, "Black Jiao, I have thousands of incarnations. Unless you can destroy all the blood-winged black mosquitoes in the world, my true spirit can return even if you seal me in the nether river. So, I'll give you 2 choices now. Either you obediently let me kill you, and we can both save some time and energy. Or, you step aside and I'll pretend that I never came to this minor kiliocosm. What do you think?" After being exposed by Lin Yuan, Mosquito Doran wasn't very angry. However, he really couldn't understand why this black Jiao would know about him. He had only left the mountain once under his teacher's order. He had been cultivating in the cave all this time. Then I have to thank you for reminding me. Lin Yuan's eyes turned cold. The black figure in front of him shook its black spear. White flames came out of its body. Then he stared at Mosquito Doran and said, "After all, there is nothing more suitable than fire to kill insects." Mosquito Doran's eyes narrowed as he stared in disbelief at Lin Yuan. He didn't know what to say. He could only say, as expected of the death tribulation of the Hongjun Dao ancestor. This black Jiao was not strong in Mosquito Doran's eyes. The black Jiao had not even reached the limit of this minor kiliocosm. Even if he reached that level, he would be an ordinary person in the great wasteland world and not a powerful person. However, this black Jiao was very strange. First, he threw out the 99 soul-scattering gourd to subdue Generals Heng and Ha. Now, he was facing off against him. He clearly didn't have any trace of enlightenment, but he could see through the power of the spatial laws to a certain extent. Not only could he avoid his magical powers, but he could also lock onto his position at critical moments. Now, he had summoned something like the Nether River to form a water serpent to fight. Only now did he become serious. However, this Black Jiao clearly majored in the Nether River technique. How could he summon the flames that he hated in the blink of an eye? Speaking of which, he wasn't afraid of those flames. After all, he had accumulated more than 10 million blood-winged black mosquitoes over the years. Even if some of them were killed, he could still leave this minor kiliacosm safely. Hiss, whoosh, the black figure stood in front of Lin Yuan. It seemed to be imitating the breathing of a human. After a while, he suddenly opened his eyes. The white flames rose again and condensed into a mysterious pattern beside him. Mosquito Daoran didn't know what that mysterious pattern represented, but he could clearly feel that the surrounding temperature was dropping. Strange, Mosquito Daoran secretly clicked his tongue. Even though the Black Flood Dragon had clearly summoned flames, it instead caused the surrounding temperature to drop. It was as if this entire region had temporarily turned into a ghost realm. A minor kiliacosm that lacked spiritual energy was enough to make him suffer. If this place really turned into a ghost realm, it would be almost impossible for him to kill the Black Jiao even if he had to pay the price of damaging his foundation. This was because there was no spiritual energy in the ghost realm. There was only endless evil spirit and resentment. It was not a power that he could absorb at all. After all, he was only one of the 5 great ferocious insects. Although his bloodline was top-notch, he couldn't absorb much spiritual energy in the ghost realm. The mysterious pattern beside the black figure became more and more eye-catching. At the same time, Mosquito Daoran also realized that the spiritual energy around him was rapidly being sucked away. It was replaced by the aura of the netherworld, which was entwined with resentment and evil spirit. It could be said that at this moment, the Black Jiao directly turned this area into its home ground. Mosquito Daoran, he had lived for so long that he almost couldn't remember some things in the past. For example, why did he become a disciple of the Grand Elder? But at this moment, he finally remembered those old things. During the God Investiture Tribulation, he called himself Mosquito Daoran. If someone asked him about his background, he would only say that he was a blood-winged black mosquito. He didn't mention that he was a bloodthirsty black mosquito, one of the 5 great ferocious insects that didn't belong to the 10 great ferocious insects. That identity was a complete disgrace to the mainstream cultivators in the untainted world. Therefore, he was placed under the command of the Grand Elder to learn the Tao Te Ching and learn the peaceful in action. He hoped that through these teachings, he could wash away the mark of the netherworld blood sea on his body. Reality proved that he did very well. He really washed away the mark of the netherworld blood sea and became one of the Grand Elder's disciples. He followed his master's order to go to the Western Pure Land to destroy the 12 Lotus platforms. That was something that both he and the Grand Supreme had taken as a gamble. Now, seeing that the surrounding environment was constantly turning into a ghost realm, Mosquito Daoran's face gradually revealed a terrified expression. Chapter 1106. Mosquito Daoran was the disciple of the Grand Supreme and belonged to the 3 sects of the Celestial Sect of Wonders. Since he had never been tainted by the Chi of Calamity, he was not worried that he would die inexplicably in the cultivation tribulation. He traveled to various battlefields, and from time to time, he would crush and kill his enemies through force or other means. His purpose was only to gain experience. Until his teacher personally came to him and gave him the order. The matter of the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit, now that he thought about it, Mosquito Daoran had never regretted it. The Western sect's methods were even more strange and powerful than he had imagined. Therefore, the great Tao of space that he was so proud of might not have been hidden from the Taoist priest. Otherwise, why would the White Lotus boy happen to take the wrong cloth bag and open the cloth bag that he was hiding in? Moreover, when he was just released, he only felt extremely hungry and needed a large amount of flesh and blood to fill his hunger. Therefore, when he saw the original form of the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit that was beaten up by the Taoist priest, he did not even ask and directly devoured it. When a large number of coincidences gathered together, it was definitely not a coincidence. It was very likely that he had been discovered by the Taoist priest long ago. In addition, the aura on his body was the aura of the celestial sect of wonders that could not be concealed. Therefore, although the Taoist priest was not sure which sect he was from, he had indeed used the Tao of the celestial sect of wonders to cause the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit to die tragically in his hands. It also caused his teacher to pay a huge price to appease the furious Grand Master of Heaven and protect him who did not know anything at that time. However, the matter of him barging into the Western Paradise and eating the 12th grade Lotus platform was beyond the Taoist priest's expectations. After all, the old thief had probably only sensed him, and he was one of the disciples of the celestial sect of wonders. Therefore, he wanted to kill him with a borrowed knife and get rid of the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit, who would pose a great threat to the Western sect in the future. Then, he secretly used this matter to sow discord between the three sects. Due to the unbearable past, Mosquito Dowran suddenly had a kind of fear and interest. He was afraid that once he fell into this ghost realm and absorbed the aura of the netherworld, he would once again become that incomparably ferocious bloodthirsty black mosquito. The black human figure casually stabbed the black spear in his hand into the void. His hands continuously formed mysterious seals. The pattern formed by the white flames behind him suddenly froze, and the surrounding ghost realm space was completely formed. Good timing. Mosquito Dowran suddenly shouted, immediately attracting Lin Yuan's attention. However, he did not make a move. Instead, he kept looking around secretly, as if he was trying to escape from Lin Yuan's hands using some kind of secret technique. However, how could he let the Mosquito Taoist leave so easily when he had already acted tough? The ghost realm was fully activated, covering both the humanoid shadow and the Mosquito Dowran. The Tao that can be said is not the Tao. A name that can be named, an extraordinary name. Mosquito Dowran began to recite the Tao Te Ching continuously after sensing that his surroundings had turned into a ghost town. He hoped to suppress his bloodthirsty side through this method and not absorb the ghostly aura of the netherworld around him. Lin Yuan sized up Mosquito Dowran with great interest, but he nodded silently in his heart. This fellow was actually still unwilling to absorb the netherworld aura when he was already in such a plight. Or rather, what was this fellow afraid of? After pondering for a moment, Lin Yuan said with a smile, Mosquito Dowran, I know that you can absorb the netherworld aura in the ghost realm. After all, you also came from the netherworld blood sea. So what if you have been practicing the Tao Te Ching for so many years? In the end, it is a cultivation method that only the human race should master. What's the use of practicing it? You were born in the netherworld blood sea. Absorbing the netherworld aura here will only be beneficial to you. Mosquito Dowran just turned a deaf ear to Lin Yuan's teasing and continued to recite the Tao Te Ching silently. Seeing Mosquito Dowran's indifference, Lin Yuan felt a burst of irritation for some reason. He sneered and said, well, I'd like to see how long you, Mosquito Dowran, can hold on. As soon as he finished speaking, the power of incense on the interface jumped. A moment later, 4 ancient swords with their own characteristics appeared beside Lin Yuan. It was the immortal slaying sword formation formed by the 4 swords of death, slaughter, trap, and death. At the same time, Shangqing Heavenly Lord, who was secretly observing, changed his expression and murmured, how could this be? The immortal slaying sword formation was originally his specialty. Now that the 4 immortal slaying swords and the immortal slaying sword formation were in his hands, how could this black Jiao find the 4 immortal slaying swords? In addition, the immortal slaying sword formation could not be set up casually. Without the help of the immortal slaying sword formation, at least 4 sage-to-be experts at the peak of the sage-to-be would be required to hold a sword in 4 directions and activate it with great Dharma power. However, Lin Yuan could directly activate the immortal slaying sword formation without the help of the immortal slaying sword formation, which was greatly beyond his expectation. He had already made up his mind to stay out of this matter. No matter what the fate of Generals Heng, Ha, and Mosquito Dowren would be, as long as he felt that they had paid a sufficient price, he would naturally end this matter and would not attack them again. After all, he was a big shot standing at the peak of the great thousand world and would not be calculative about every little thing. Of course, if he felt that Mosquito Dowren had not paid a sufficient price, his personality would also affect his 3 separations. Naturally, he would not let this matter go. With the command of Lin Yuan's mind, the 4 swords each took their own positions and formed a huge sword formation. They constantly shot out blood-red sword shadows toward Mosquito Dowren. So that's how it is. Amazing, really amazing. Shangqing Heavenly Lord carefully observed the 4 swords that Lin Yuan had summoned. However, the power and murderous aura that they should have were not even 1/10 of them. It was not until now that he realized that there was nothing wrong with the ability of his original body. He did not even know that the 4 immortal slaying swords had been stolen. It was that although the Black Jiao had indeed summoned the immortal slaying sword formation to deal with Mosquito Dowren, it was different from the real immortal slaying sword formation. The immortal slaying sword formation here was just a random image taken from the long river of time. Under the enhancement of the incense power, it had a part of its past power. However, it was still a poor imitation. It could be said that it had the appearance but not the spirit. Those red sword shadows seemed to be the sword chi of the immortal slaying sword formation, but in fact, the Black Jiao had imitated the incense power into the immortal slaying sword chi and blasted it on Mosquito Dowren. It was no wonder that the immortal slaying sword formation, which was known as the number 1 killing formation in the untainted land, was not even 1/10 of its original power and murderous aura. Mosquito Dowren was still silently reciting the Tao Te Ching. Soon, a thick layer of mana shield appeared on his body. Chapter 1107. The Tao Te Ching could be said to be a powerful counterattack against Hongjun by the Grand Supreme. After the investiture of the gods, the great Zhou dynasty ruled the world and enjoyed the fate of the country for 800 years. The royal family's prestige collapsed and the country was torn apart. The feudal lords rose and attacked and annexed each other. Gradually, the spring and autumn period became chaotic. In this chaotic period, countless powerful figures emerged. There was no need to mention the ancestors of the various schools of thought. In fact, there were only a dozen schools of thought that left their names. However, at that time, there were far more than just 100 schools of thought. Heroes and sages were also constantly emerging and there were always a few names that could not be ignored. Confucianism, Confucius. Taoism, Laozi. School of Moz. Not to mention the school of Yin Yang and its ancestor Zhou Yan, which was separated from the Taoism. It was a game between Hao Yan and the Grand Supreme. Who knew which of the sages in the world were the spies of the powerful figures in the untainted land and which of them were the powerful figures born in time? But no matter what, Laozi Li Er appeared because the Grand Supreme did not hesitate to gamble his own good corpse incarnation and reincarnate into the mortal world to plan this great merit for himself. Before the appearance of the Tao Te Ching, the Grand Elder was generally addressed as the hierarch of the Ren school. Li Er traveled to various countries to promote Taoism. Before he left Hanga Pass and became a Buddha, he gradually became known as the Tao Ancestor. This behavior was tantamount to a provocation and declaration of war against Hongjun. Because everyone who knew about the existence of the untainted land knew that the Tao Ancestor was Hongjun from the beginning. After Laozi was born, the Tao Ancestor gradually became Li Er. After dealing with Hongjun, Li'er lightly rode out of Hanga Pass on his green ox and transformed into Shakyamuni to perform the beard transformation Buddha. He connected the whole incident. At that time, the Grand Supreme was already a heavenly sage. Even if he founded Taoism and went with the general trend to obtain great merit, it was meaningless. Firstly, he was already one of the sages of the heavenly Tao. Naturally, he could no longer rely on his merits to become a sage of the human Tao. Furthermore, during the chaotic times of the spring and autumn period, the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors were not just for show. With their hatred for Hongjuan's disciples, if the Grand Supreme wanted to become a sage of the human Tao, they might think that this was another scheme of Hongjuan's. They would definitely interfere and cause a lot of trouble. Therefore, the Grand Supreme had completed the stealing of the position of the Taoist master step by step and attacked the Western sect at the same time. Perhaps in the eyes of the Grand Supreme at that time, the battle between the Celestial Sect of Wonders and the Western sect was actually nothing much. It was just Hongjuan's scheme. Then the question was, where did the power of merit that was obtained after the establishment of Taoism go? The answer was, Tao Te Ching. In the world of low-level martial arts, the Tao Te Ching might be an ordinary Taoist scripture with some principles recorded in it. Even the cultivation method of Laozi in it was an unsolved mystery. However, in a world like the untainted world, the Tao Te Ching was definitely a real treasure of merit. Its grade was definitely not low. However, it was also during the spring and autumn period that the Grand Supreme had done too much. Therefore, after the calamity of the journey to the west began, the Celestial Sect of Wonders was defeated by the Western sect. It was obvious whether Hongjun had interfered behind this. Interestingly, many people thought that Patriarch Bodhi was the incarnation of Buddha, but in fact, he was not. Because there were many interpretations of the journey to the west. For example, Sun Wukong's cultivation method was said to be the Great Way of Heaven Immortal Art, and some said it was the Great Way of Heaven Immortal Art. However, there was no doubt that Bodhi had given Sun Wukong the cultivation method of the Celestial Sect of Wonders. In the original book, there was a poem that said, Tao is the most mysterious. Don't treat Jindan as an ordinary thing. If you don't meet a good person to teach you, you will be speechless. Have you ever seen a disciple of the Western Sect of Wonders cultivate Jindan instead of Jindan? From the beginning, this heaven's equal sage of the Eastern land did not aim to cultivate Buddhism. It was just that the Celestial Sect of Wonders was defeated in the calamity of the journey to the west. Therefore, in the end, the monkey became the victorious fighting Buddha of the Western sect. Mosquito Daoren sat cross-legged in the gloomy demonic region and kept reciting the contents of the Tao Te Ching. His facial features, which had become somewhat ferocious due to the influence of the nether ghost Qi, gradually became peaceful. He constantly emitted a natural and indifferent aura, as if he had completely merged with the world. When the Black Jiao and Mosquito Daoren showed their skills, it might be nothing in the untainted world. However, in the eyes of the guards of the Celestial Gate, it was undoubtedly at the level of immortals fighting. After all, the Tianmu world was a small kiliocosm. Coupled with the fact that someone was secretly suppressing it, it was unable to complete the 3 realms. Not only was there an upper limit to the realm of these cultivators and demonic beasts, there was even a gap in the originally powerful cultivation techniques due to the changes in the great Tao of heaven and earth. Those powerful techniques and divine abilities that originally only existed in the records of cultivation techniques could not be used. When one reached the realm of ascension, it was simply a wrong path. If someone were to delve into these techniques and divine abilities, Qi deviation would be the most basic operation. However, the skills of the Black Jiao and Mosquito Daoren, one of them revealed a set of seals and directly turned the world into the gloomy demonic region. The other was reciting scriptures that they could not understand. However, he was one with the world and was not affected by the gloomy demonic region. The Shangqing Heavenly Lord who was secretly observing looked at the Mosquito Daoren who was reciting the Tao Te Ching with a gloomy gaze. For a moment, he was speechless. He had always thought that when he joined forces with his two elder brothers to scheme against that old man, Hongjun, all these years of running around the myriad realms, he had barely reached the stage where he could exchange blows with Hongjun outside of the Eldritch world. This was already a very impressive progress. However, he did not expect that he had still underestimated the heroes of the world. There was no need to talk about old ancestor Yang Mei, who was currently in the Sea of Sufferings. At his peak, he was able to directly pull Hongjun, who had already merged with the Heavenly Tao, into the River of Time to battle in the Eldritch world. In the end, they were evenly matched. As for that big brother of his, it seemed that he had not been idle all these years. From the Tao Te Ching, he actually could not sense the presence of a Heavenly Tao sage. However, if he were to be serious, this power was indeed the power of a sage. No, calling it a sage was a bit of an insult to this power. This was the power of a Chaos Daluo Golden Immortal. Without the support of the primordial violet energy, without entering the Heavenly Tao, Earth Tao, and Human Tao, he had the power that was not inferior to a sage. His elder brother had probably followed him and schemed against that old man, Hongjun. Although he was still one of the 6 heavenly sages in name, he had already transformed from a prisoner to an existence that was not inferior to Hongjun in the Eldritch world. He was a sage of the great Tao. Humph. The Shengqing Heavenly Lord snorted coldly. Staring at the mosquito Daoran, who was reciting the Tao Te Ching, he murmured, "Is this a warning to me not to attack your disciple? Is the hatred of the Guiling going to end here? Don't even think about it." Chapter 1108. The Power of the Primordial Chaos Daluo. The Grand Pure One is not simple. Ever since Lin Yuan realized that his cultivation was damaged, the system, which had been pretending to be dead, was blown out. Although Lin Yuan did not communicate with the system, he still thought of some things in his mind. Mosquito Daoran recited the Tao Te Ching, which was tantamount to showing his roots. Without a doubt, Mosquito Daoran was definitely one of the Grand Pure One's favorite disciples. After all, this Mosquito Daoran, one of the primordial 5 ferocious worms, became famous in order to buy time for the Grand Pure One to become a Buddha. But now, it seemed that things were not as simple as he had expected. Attacking the Western sect was really just a matter of convenience for the Grand Pure One, and it was a matter of convenience. The Grand Pure One's incarnation, Li Er, went to the mortal world and created Taoism. He passed the position of the sect master of Ren and the primordial purple qi to the great Taoist master Xian Du. He also used the heaven and earth exquisite black and yellow pagoda, the Vajra bracelet, and the Tao Te Ching to suppress the luck of Taoism. Thus, it caused the origin of the great Tao to tremble and gave a Tao fruit to the Grand Pure One. The Grand Pure One abolished the position of the Heavenly Tao sage and established a sect. He received the support of endless merit of the great Tao. His realm fell to the peak of the sage to be, and he regained the primordial chaos Daluo golden immortal realm. After calling himself the Tao sage, he became a true Tao ancestor. Even the profound sect belonged to the Tao. Since the appearance of the Tao Te Ching, the Grand Pure One could truly transcend the world and be free. He was no longer under the jurisdiction of the Heavenly Tao. The system showed words of praise. Of course, if it was still the Heavenly Tao of the primordial world, it would definitely be furious after being stabbed in the back by the Grand Pure One. However, the problem was that he was just an incomplete origin of the Heavenly Tao of the primordial world. Ever since Hongjun merged with the Heavenly Tao and stole its authority, he became a special existence that wandered in the universe. Therefore, it was not unhappy that the Grand Pure One had escaped the control of the Heavenly Tao. Instead, it was still in the primordial world because the Grand Pure One still stayed in the primordial world after he transcended. It must have had a plot against Hongjun. It was happy that Hongjun had a strong enemy. But the problem is, Lin Yuan and the system opened their mouths almost at the same time. Both of them looked surprised. Logically speaking, the Grand Supreme had established Taoism, attained the status of Tao Saint, and accepted the Taoist sect under his wing. To Hongjun, such an action was not as simple as losing the position of Tao ancestor. If Hongjun was not an innate god and had obtained the absolute right to rule the Eldritch world, he would not be a match for the Grand Supreme at all. Otherwise, the Grand Elder would not have stayed in the untainted world to continue the game with Hongjun after stabbing him in the back. After all, the world of cultivation was the same in that world. The law of the jungle was the key. If one did not have the strength of a chess player, the chess player on the other side did not need to play with him at all. He could just kill him directly. But the biggest problem was that the Grand Supreme's series of actions were done right under Hongjun's nose. Why did this happen? Was Hongjun's eyes covered, or did he not want to care about it and deliberately let the situation develop to this point? If it was the former, could there be an existence equal to Hongjun in the entire Eldritch world who held back Hongjun when the Grand Supreme moved and prevented Hongjun from interfering with the Grand Supreme's Tao? If it was the latter, they even had to carefully consider whether the Grand Supreme was an enemy or a friend. The most terrible thing was that no matter which of these two possibilities was true, it was not good news for Lin Yuan. Because in the Eldritch world, there were some existences who could shake Hongjun, who was in harmony with the Tao of Heaven, but they were definitely old monsters at the level of Yang Mei and Shi Qin. Since they did not participate in the suppression of Hongjun back then, they might not do anything today, countless years later. Therefore, the person who held back Hongjun was definitely someone who had a deep hatred for Hongjun. After counting, there were only a few people, who were either powerhouses of the human Tao or powerhouses of the Tao. There were several versions of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors since ancient times. After eliminating the least possibility of the 3 sovereigns, Fuxi, Zhurong, Shenong, and Fuxi, Nuwa, and Shenong, it was certain that no matter which version of the 3 sovereigns there were 2 powerful figures, Fuxi and Shenong. The remaining one, whether it was Suiren or the Yellow Emperor, was not easy to deal with. Especially the Yellow Emperor Xinyuan, who repeatedly jumped between the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, was an absolute hero who mastered killing and conquering. Lin Yuan even personally believed that these 4 versions were wrong. The real 3 sovereigns should be the 3 human leaders, Yu Chao, Suiren, and Ji Xing, who were recorded in Zhuangzi. However, although the 3 human sovereigns shared the fruit of the heavenly way sage, the 3 of them were not to be trifled with. If they set up a trap to trick Hongjun into the fire cloud cave, it was definitely more than enough to hold Hongjun back for 100 years. As for the powerhouse of the Tao, there was nothing to say. There was only the primordial spirit of the Earth Empress, who had turned into Samsara, Empress Pingxin. Although Empress Pingxin, who was supposed to be on par with Hongjun, became a prisoner in the netherworld, if she had any plans, whether it was the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva of the Western religious sect, the 10 Yama kings of the underworld, the immortals of the Xianmen and the Divine Way, or even the mysterious Lord of Mount Tai, they might not be able to gain any benefits in the netherworld. After all, Empress Pingxin was invincible in the netherworld. If she wanted to do something, Hongjun's real body had to suppress her, and it would take a long time. Was there anyone in the untainted land who was easy to deal with? Not to mention the system itself, which had been causing trouble for Hongjun. Tong Tian, who was sent out by San Qing, was also a top powerhouse in any great wide world. Therefore, for countless years, the system and Tong Tian were not the only ones who were secretly active. The powerhouses in the untainted land were also trying to find ways to save themselves, such as the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, Dao Pingxin and Tai Shangtao ancestor. Now, they might have completely gotten rid of the Black Zhao's control. Death test, it was not necessarily a person or a thing. In recent years, Hongjun had been going against the flow and ruling the untainted land alone. The others had been complaining about him for a long time. It was impossible to change the old habits. Sooner or later, a long war would break out. The secret brewing in the heaven martial world was probably just a fuse. From Lin Yuan's point of view, it was a good thing for the overall situation. After all, when fighting against Hong Jun, he could have a group of powerful allies, which would greatly increase his chances of winning. However, from the perspective of his own interests, if they met, how should he face Empress Pingxin? What attitude would Empress Pingxin have towards him? Chapter 1109. Lin Yuan pondered for a moment and opened his mouth to speak. Suddenly, a voice exploded in his mind. Lin Yuan, if you kill this mosquito Daoran for me, I will reward you generously. This was the voice of Shangqing Heavenly Lord. Lin Yuan was speechless. Therefore, it was better to rely on oneself than on anyone else. Among the Sanqing family, although the Grand Supreme had always played the role of a big brother and a peacemaker, they were still brothers after all. Their relationship was not bad. Even when the Sanqing family joined forces to plot against Hong Jun, the Grand Supreme and Yuanshi were not selfish at all and sent the youngest Tongtian sect leader out. But now, because of the old grudge between the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit and the Mosquito Daoran, Shangqing Heavenly Lord actually asked him to kill the Mosquito Daoran without hesitation. This was really, he did not know what to say. With the Tongtian sect leader's protective and vengeful character, he was probably beyond saving. Seeing that Lin Yuan did not respond, Shangqing Heavenly Lord clenched his teeth and communicated with Lin Yuan through divine thoughts again. The 4 celestial slaying swords are still in my original body's hands. If you help me get rid of this fiend, I will sacrifice my face and ask for the 4 celestial slaying swords and the celestial slaying formation map for you. So what? Although Hong Jun did not have a good reputation, the great Tao of 3 corpses was indeed something. Although the cultivation of the 3 corpses incarnations could not surpass the original body, most of the 3 corpses incarnations were transformed from treasures. Most of them were not inferior to the original body in terms of combat power. They even mastered some techniques that the original body would be envious of. More importantly, the 3 corpses incarnations had independent consciousness. Although they would listen to the instructions of the original body, when they were independent, it was not wrong to say that the 3 corpses incarnations were 3 independent cultivators. Just like how Shangqing Heavenly Lord was one of the 3 corpses incarnations of the Tongtian sect leader, but he still addressed the original body as a fellow cultivator. As for whether his words could be trusted or not, after all, he was one of the Sanqing. Although the Tongtian sect leader did not care about his reputation as much as the Heavenly Lord Yuanshi, he could still stick to his words. In addition, the Tongtian sect leader had asked Meng Qi to kill Mosquito Daoran, which meant that Meng Qi had formed a karma with the Taishang. On the other hand, the Shangqing Heavenly Lord had also formed a karma with Meng Qi. If the Shangqing Heavenly Lord did not give Meng Qi the 4 immortal slaying swords and the immortal slaying formation map, the karma would harm Meng Qi sooner or later. Junior will try his best. Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly as he agreed with a smile. What was there to be afraid of having karma with the Tao Saint Grand Elder? Ever since he had been saved by the system and sent to the heaven martial world, he had formed karma with Hong Jun. Lin Yuan was very clear about this. From the start, he had been trying to level the relationship between himself and the system because he knew that he did not owe the system any karma. Although the system had saved him, it had also nurtured him as a weapon to deal with Hong Jun. Thus, he did not owe the system anything. Then there was the problem. Since he had already formed a karma with Hong Jun, so what if there was another Tao Saint? If he could not defeat Hong Jun, his body and soul would be destroyed. Senior Luo Ho was an excellent example. If he could defeat Hong Jun, it meant that he would not be afraid when facing the Taishang Tao Saint. He would just have to use his strength to fight. The main thing was that the Taishang's personality was there. If one said that he was quiet and did not do anything, there would be no problem. He could play the role of a good big brother and a good teacher. However, when it came to matters that would affect his fundamental interests, the Taisheng would not be heartless. Lin Yuan did not believe that the Taisheng would fight to the death with him for the sake of Mosquito Daoren. There were no good people in the Eldritch world. Be it Sanqing, Hongyun, Hongjun, or even the various Eldritch world bosses, if one were to compare them seriously, one would not be able to find half a good person. In other words, those who were truly good would not be able to leave their names in the harsh environment of the Eldritch world. They would have been eaten clean. Different from those stories that had been processed by art, the real cultivation world was a place where the strong preyed on the weak. Although it was not to the extent that people would kill for treasures and seek revenge every day, similar things were done by everyone. Although the shameless duo of the Western sect was extremely shameless, on the other hand, they were the most honest existences. Shameless was shameless, evil was evil, and they did not hide it. In terms of actions, one did not care about one's heart. In terms of heart, there was no saint. This sentence was applicable in any world and any place. As for protecting one's shortcomings, the Tongtian sect leader's character of protecting one's shortcomings was the same as the Yuanshi Tianzuan's pride. The latter did not care who the problem was, as long as one embarrassed him, he would fight it out. However, the Tongtian sect leader did not care who one was or what one's background was. If one dared to touch the person he liked, he would definitely kill that person. However, protecting one's shortcomings did not mean that the Tongtian sect leader would do it at all costs. Just like now, although Mosquito Daoren, who killed the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit, was close at hand, Shangqing Tianzuan, who had the ability to kill him, did not do it directly. Instead, he did not hesitate to use the 4 celestial slaying swords and the celestial slaying sword diagram as the price to ask Lin Yuan to do it. It was obvious that he did not want to fall out with the Taisheng, but he also wanted to avenge the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit. Naturally, it was the same when it came to the Taisheng. When Lin Yuan's cultivation of the scripture of all beings was completed, he would definitely not be inferior to a sage of the Great Path. Coupled with the supremacy of the Great Path, Lin Yuan's strength would definitely not be inferior to that of an Origin Daluo Golden Immortal with the help of the scripture of all beings. If he went to the Tianwu world, even Hongjun at his peak would have to temporarily avoid him. He did not believe that the Taisheng would fall out with him over a Mosquito Daoren and insist on a life-and-death battle. System: deduct the power of incense and increase the power of the celestial slaying sword formation. A cold light flashed through Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes, and he silently communicated with the system in his mind. In the instant that he said this, the power of incense suddenly dropped and directly fell to 300 million. Although Lin Yuan was pained, he could understand. Laozi had bestowed the original copy of the Tao Te Sutra to Yi Shi. Apparently, after Yi Shi finished comprehending it, he sent the original copy to the Red Cloud Cave to be used to suppress the human race's fortune. The Tao Te Sutra, which had already absorbed a lot of power of virtue, transformed into a supreme treasure of human virtue. Although Mosquito Daoren had only recited the Tao Te Sutra, Lin Yuan's celestial slaying sword formation was not the real deal. In order to break through the defenses of the Tao Te Sutra, it was not difficult to understand why he would expend a lot of incense. Furthermore, once he killed Mosquito Daoren, wouldn't the 4 immortal slaying swords and the immortal slaying sword formation truly fall into his hands? This might be a small loss, but the benefits were indeed quite significant. Words are not good, but words of praise are not good. Those who are kind do not argue, but those who argue are not good. Mosquito Daoren was still reciting the Tao Te Sutra. Lin Yuan, who had read the contents of the Tao Te Sutra in his past life, could vaguely remember that Mosquito Daoren had already reached the end of the book. If his guess was correct, once he finished reciting the entire book, it would definitely be the time for Mosquito Daoren to counterattack. Chapter 11:10. The Way of Heaven, benefits but not harms. The way of the sage, for the sake of not fighting. Lin Yuan did not know how much content was in the Tao Te Ching written by the Taishang Shu. Most of the books circulating in the future were missing due to various reasons such as natural disasters and man-made disasters. Many of the books even had monster-like existences. However, when he heard Mosquito Doran's words, the Tao Te Ching that Lin Yuan knew had already ended. Moreover, these two sentences carried an inexplicable power. Translated into plain words, it meant that the law of nature was to let everything benefit without harming them. The sage's code of conduct should be to not compete with others in everything he did. If there was no mythological background, there would be no problem with this sentence according to the above understanding. However, with the mythological background, these two sentences were equivalent to completely denying Hongjun. People only knew that the destined 6 sages became heavenly sages after being bestowed with the Hongmeng immortal qi by Hongjun. They had to respectfully address Hongjun as their teacher. However, if they did not participate in this grand scheme, who would have thought that the so-called destined 6 sages were just prisoners and dolls? They had been thinking about how to escape and overthrow Hongjun's rule from the beginning to the end. The moment the Taishang Shu wrote the Tao Te Ching, it was tantamount to declaring war on Hongjun. After these two sentences were read, the endless power of morality suddenly appeared from all directions and supported Mosquito Doran's body. In the tide of the power of morality, the Sinluo demonic region created by Lin Yuan was as fragile as a piece of white paper. It was easily torn apart and the real world was revealed again. Lin Yuan's face suddenly turned pale and a look of horror flashed across his eyes. This Sinluo demonic region was not a small trick. As the world was getting closer and closer to completion, he condensed a piece of underworld soil with the help of the underworld black water. Every inch of land required more than 50 kilograms of underworld black water. If he wanted to condense an inch of underworld soil without carrying out a large-scale massacre, Lin Yuan would have to work day and night for 3 full days to condense a piece of underworld soil. This piece of underworld soil combined the power of the underworld river that Lin Yuan currently controlled with the power of the Hungry Ghost Path and the Azura Path's reincarnation power. He even borrowed many characteristics of the law of space from the willow branch that ancestor Yang Mei had given him. This was how he created the Sinluo demonic region. However, Mosquito Doran had only read the Tao Te Ching once and directly broke his 3 Luo Qing. If he wanted to create another piece of Luo demonic region, he would have to start. Amazing! Lin Yuan took a deep breath, calmed down his mood, and praised from the bottom of his heart. The Tao Te Ching deserved to be called a merit treasure. For the first time, he truly felt the gap between himself and the real big shots in the untainted land. However, Lin Yuan was not discouraged. After all, the Tao Te Ching was a merit treasure. With the help of the Tao Te Ching, it was very easy for it to break his Sinluo demonic region. If it could not break it, Lin Yuan would have to think about what went wrong. Now, the Heaven Martial World had not completed the 3 realms and 6 paths. Lin Yuan could only imitate a similar power. When the world was completed, his Sinluo demonic region would naturally be supported by the power of the world. He dared not say that he would be recognized by the Great Way, but he would really become the underworld of the Heaven Martial World. At that time, not to mention the Tao Te Ching, even the Tao Te Ching, would not necessarily be able to destroy this underworld. Many people would combine the netherworld and the netherworld together. In fact, it was different. The netherworld was just the layout of the Western sect. It combined the rules that existed in the netherworld to create a set of reincarnation processes. There were 5 types of immortals: heaven, earth, man, ghost, and god. Among them, ghost immortals were the weakest. In a sense, the netherworld was a subordinate unit. Normally speaking, when the underworld was mentioned, practically everyone's first reaction would be the underworld. This was because the legends of the 10 kings of hell and the 18 levels of hell were too widespread. This caused many people to think that the underworld was referring to the underworld. But in fact, the netherworld was just a government office built in the underworld. Fengdu, Mount Tai, and the netherworld corresponded to the Tao of the Tao Te Ching, the god of Haotian, and the Buddhism of the Western religious sect respectively. They divided the position of the Saint of Earth and completely restricted Empress Pingxin. Anyone who knew a little about the netherworld knew that the Lord of Mount Tai had always been a mysterious existence. The ones who really fought fiercely in the underworld were Divine Ti, Yule, the ghost emperors of 5 directions, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, and the 10 kings of hell, who represented the Tao Te Ching and the Buddhism Te Ching. After all, although the Lord of Mount Tai was backed by the heavenly court, all the immortals in the heavenly court, except for the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals formed by the great cultivators who were ranked on the immortal list, all the immortals in the heavenly court had a backer. When they gave Haotian face, they would call him God or Great Emperor. When they didn't give him face, they wouldn't listen to him. How could Haotian really ignore their feelings and forcibly activate the list of deification to control these immortals? Even worse, Sanqing's incarnations like the Lord of the Tao Te Ching and the Lord of Lingbao served in the heavenly court. Haotian could only coax and worship them. Even if Hong Jun was dragged out, Haotian had to call them senior brothers. The weakness of the heavenly court was not a matter of a day or two. It was said that the Lord of Mount Tai was the first successor to the throne of the Earth Empress. In other words, if Empress Pingxin suddenly died one day, the Lord of Mount Tai could take over the throne of the Earth Empress, who controlled the netherworld and samsara. However, in fact, not to mention whether there was any succession in the untainted world, Empress Pingxin was invincible in the netherworld and was an invincible sage. Lin Yuan really couldn't think of any accident that could kill Empress Pingxin. If such a thing really happened, the netherworld would be plowed by the plow. How could the Lord of Mount Tai live alone? Therefore, the Lord of Mount Tai was not really mysterious. From the perspective of the weakness of the heavenly court, this branch of the underworld only needed to take care of its own affairs. At the same time, it was responsible for communicating with Empress Pingxin and supervising the struggle between the underworld and the underworld of Fengdu. It was to ensure that neither side would do anything too excessive. Otherwise, if Empress Pingxin was angry, no one would have a good ending. To put it in a more humble way, the underworld of Mount Tai did not have the ability to compete with the Buddhist and Taoist sects for who was the head of the underworld. To put it in a more grandiose way, the underworld of Mount Tai was established by the heavenly court to mediate and judge the struggle between the Buddhist and Taoist sections. There were many people who caused trouble in the underworld, especially in the netherworld. It could be said that it was plagued with disasters. However, there were not many who caused trouble in the netherworld. Even if there were, they would not have a good ending. The Tianmu world did not have the 5 major systems of heaven, earth, man, ghost and god. If the netherworld was established, Lin Yuan would be in a state of supremacy. Chapter 11:11. Black Jiao, your realm of ghosts has been broken. What else do you have? Just use it. Mosquito Daoran looked at the Black Jiao seriously. He held the handle of his spear with one hand and pointed the sharp spearhead to the ground. Lin Yuan did not take over the conversation. Although Mosquito Daoran had broken the realm of ghosts by reciting the Tao Te Ching, he did not attack immediately. Instead, he signaled for Lin Yuan to continue attacking. Under such circumstances, if Lin Yuan continued to be aggressive, he would inevitably be at a disadvantage. In fact, Mosquito Doran's behavior was not rare in the untainted world. Some people called it a Dao discussion. In layman's terms, it meant to learn from each other. If Lin Yuan answered, no matter what the result was, if Mosquito Daoran died in his hands, it would be his fault. In the future, when the world was repaired or he entered the untainted world, the Grand Supreme, Xuandu, Taoism, and the mighty figures of the human sect would have plenty of excuses to find trouble with him. Because this was a learning from each other, not a life and death battle. Mosquito Dowran, I respect you as a senior. Today, I can leave you a whole corpse. I will accept this karma. After pondering for a moment, Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light. He said jokingly, Senior, have you forgotten why you came all the way to this spirit space? Now you think I am difficult to deal with and want to find an excuse to get rid of me. Do you really think I am a fool? Surnamed Lin. Mosquito Dowran was shocked. He had expected that Lin Yuan would refuse his request for a Dao discussion. However, he did not expect that the black Jiao in front of him was surnamed Lin. Although he did not know the growth path of this black Jiao, he was sure that the dragon bloodline in his body was very pure. Although he was only a flood dragon, in terms of bloodline density, he was not inferior to the dragons of the ancestral dragon's generation, but compared to the dragons of the four seas in today's untainted world, he was probably not inferior to a true dragon. With such a pure bloodline, Mosquito Dowran wouldn't be surprised even if this black Jiao told him that it was the son of some prehistoric almighty being. But this black Jiao's surname was not Ao. Mosquito Dowran's lips curled into a sinister grin. Me? Good, good, good. It seems like you, the black Jiao, are really lucky. But that's fine, since you are not of the dragon race's bloodline, I won't have to worry about the Ao clan's revenge anymore. The bloodline of the Four Seas Dragon Clan. Suddenly, the Heavenly Gate Guardians who were watching the battle were shocked. They looked at Lin Yuan and Mosquito Dowran with fear in their eyes. The fact that the black Jiao was not a native of the Tianwu world was something that had been determined since a long time ago. This was because the black Jiao was an existence that appeared out of thin air. Even if the various forces tried their best, they still couldn't find the birthplace and clan of the black Jiao. How could an existence that could cultivate to the limit of the Tianwu world be a fool? It was just that no one had brought this matter to the surface. Even the matter of the reincarnation of the demon emperor was just a joke. Not to mention the great cultivators on the human side, even the demon beasts of the desolate demon realm were unwilling to enter the cycle of reincarnation. They would prepare a grotto heaven and leave behind countless backup plans. Even if they successfully completed their reincarnation, it was normal for them to not appear in the world for decades. After all, anyone in the cultivation world could be said to have enemies everywhere. Even if there was no hatred, it was naturally excellent to have one less cultivation resource. Therefore, once they appeared in the world, they would be almost as strong as when they were at their peak. For example, although young Qinglin of the Blood God sect successfully completed his reincarnation, if it wasn't for Lin Yuan's strong rise in the northern frontier and his suppression of the sects, who knew when this ancient cultivator would appear in public? A reincarnation of the demon emperor of the spirit awakening realm, wouldn't it be a joke? However, Lin Yuan had indeed pulled the tiger skin well back then and displayed the deterrence of the ancient demon court to the extreme. After all, those who were not powerful could not defeat Lin Yuan, and those powerful figures were very clear about one thing: the ancient demon court was not destroyed. Instead, it disintegrated on its own for some reason and disappeared in the long river of history. Now, the top figures among the guardians of the heavenly gates were most likely small fries in the era when the ancient demon court was active. These small fries had become big shots and lived until now. Who could guarantee that the experts of the ancient demon court had fallen? Therefore, under the premise that there were no huge benefits, indeed, no one was willing to offend Lin Yuan. After that, Lin Yuan rose in the northern frontier and established the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Although it attracted the attention of some people, they did not get much benefit. The Black Jiao pulled out a background that seemed to be even more terrifying than the ancient demon court in the Endless Sea. Moreover, there were indeed experts from other worlds who came to suppress all enemies for Lin Yuan. In a short 3 minutes, it was enough to scare these big shots who were used to being at ease. However, where Lin Yuan came from and how powerful the forces behind him were still unsolved mysteries. There were experts from the outside world who entered the Sky Martial world to deal with Lin Yuan. This could be said to be unexpected, but it was also reasonable. The natives of the Sky Martial world did not know how vast the various worlds were, but only a small number of people could obtain the cultivation resources of any world. This was an ecological environment that could not be avoided in any world. Therefore, the more powerful the forces behind Lin Yuan were, the more enemies he would have. This was something that could not be avoided. For example, the cultivators of the Sky Martial world, whether it was the imperial court, sect, or aristocratic family, there were many conflicts between them. However, in the end, there were almost no deep hatred between them. 99% of them were for resources and benefits, and there were very few boring disputes over face. However, now it seemed that the background of the dragon race of the Four Seas was not simple. The Endless Sea was originally ruled by the whale race. With the appearance of the dragon race of the Four Seas, and after a long period of war, the powerful whale race was killed and expelled. The overlord of the Endless Sea was changed to the dragon race of the Four Seas. This was something that everyone knew, but no one knew where the powerful dragon race of the Four Seas came from. They only knew that when they appeared, they had the strength to contend with the overlords of the Endless Sea and the natives. After reproducing for so many years, the dragon bloodline demonic beasts became nobles among the demonic beasts. However, it was also a fact that the throne of the dragon race of the Four Seas was not stable. Not to mention the demonic beasts and the various sea demon clans in the Endless Sea, even the guardians of the Heavenly Gate wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to bite off a piece of fat meat from the Endless Sea. However, when the young man in the blood-red robe finished speaking, immediately many people gave up on this idea. When they looked at the Endless Sea, there was a faint trace of fear. Chapter 11-12. Although the two cultivators from the outside world who were dressed like generals were suppressed by the Scarlet Gourd as soon as they entered the arena, the Heavenly Gate Guardians who had a little bit of eyesight could see that the other party's strength was definitely not inferior to the top among them. Moreover, the purity and quality of the energy was far above theirs. The moment they stepped out of the Heavenly Gate, their faces revealed looks of disdain. Obviously, they came from a world that was countless times stronger than the Tianwu world. That was to be expected. These guys were here to deal with the Black Jiao. The Black Jiao's background was mysterious and it was definitely far beyond their expectations. This was because the forces in the Tianwu world were not completely ignorant of the myriad of worlds. For example, the Wandering Immortal sect was a powerful force that had established branches in various worlds. However, the top experts they knew did not dare to say that they could casually cross over to any world and still maintain the ability to crush everything. However, the experts summoned by the Black Jiao could obviously do that. Therefore, these guys who came to look for trouble with the Black Jiao, even if their backgrounds were inferior to the Black Jiao's, they were still far stronger than the Tianwu world. However, even such existences were vaguely afraid of the dragon race of the Four Seas and the revenge of the Ao clan. One had to know that even in the Tianwu world, the direct descendants of the dragon race of the Four Seas also called themselves Ao. Good guy. One of the desolate demon realm's dragon race who was secretly watching the battle suddenly smiled happily. He could not suppress the pride on his face. Just watching a show and he found himself a powerful backer. This was a huge gain. I have no relationship with the Ao clan. It can even be said that I have no relationship with the forces over there. Therefore, you don't have to worry that after killing me, they will take revenge on you. However, the prerequisite is that, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and said mockingly, "You can really kill me." Hearing this, the mosquito Daoran narrowed his eyes slightly. Because in his opinion, Lin Yuan's words were indeed too arrogant. Not to mention that Lin Yuan was only a person from the ancient era, even in the chaotic world, other than the gods like Yang Mei and Hong Jun, there were not many existences that had lived longer than him. The so-called 5 primordial ferocious insects were all tainted with the primordial qi left behind by Pan Gu. Those like him who had sealed themselves and did not appear in the world again were not well known. However, he did not believe that Lin Yuan had not heard of the others. In the Journey to the West Calamity, the number 1 was the main character of the Journey to the West drama, the golden cicada who was sent into the samsara by Tathagata and reincarnated as Tang Sanzang. Because of the series of dramas in the Journey to the West, many people might think that the Tang Sanzang who went to the West to retrieve the Buddhist scriptures was the gentle and polite white-faced monk in the dramas. However, before his reincarnation, the golden cicada was infamous in the chaotic world. His original form was a golden cicada with 6 pairs of thin wings on his back. He looked harmless, but he had a huge appetite. Every primitive creature that met the golden cicada would become his food. In addition, the golden cicada's mortal body was indestructible. Not to mention ordinary magical weapons, even divine fire and divine lightning couldn't hurt him at all. In the Journey to the West, there was a famous scene where Tang Sanzang beat the white bone demon 3 times. Because the monkey had beaten the white bone demon's human form many times with his stick, Tang Sanzang was finally disliked and drove away. However, before his reincarnation, Tang Sanzang had killed many more people than the monkey. Moreover, although the monkey was a demon, he had never eaten a human. On the contrary, in his previous life, Tang Sanzang, who was full of mercy, had eaten many innocent souls. In the Journey to the West, some people said that the golden cicada was sent into the samsara to be reincarnated as Tang Sanzang because he and the Tathagata had different views on Buddhism. However, in fact, the reason why the golden cicada was chosen was that the Tathagata wanted to wear down the golden cicada's fierceness. As for the monkey, it was just a show to the Grand Supreme and the others. After removing some artistic embellishments, the truth was so cruel. In the Journey to the West, there was also the 100-eyed Demon King, who was also one of the 5 great ferocious insects, the multi-eyed golden centipede. Once the 100 eyes on its back opened, it could emit an infinite amount of golden light. It could break all kinds of dharma in the world and could transform into an immortal body. Like the golden cicada, it was also sent to the Western sect and cultivated into the 1,000-eyed thousand-hand Buddha. There was nothing much to say about the Holy Dragon King's son-in-law, the 9-headed insect. It was also one of the 81 tribulations and its strength was not below that of the monkey. In the end, the monkey was forced to invite Yang Jian. The 2 of them worked together to kill one of the 9-headed insect. In the end, the 9-headed insect escaped. The other one was more powerful. It was the 9-tailed scorpion. She had listened to the Tathagata's preaching in the spirited mountain. She accidentally stung the Tathagata and broke his Zhang 6 golden body. It was so painful that the Tathagata could not preach in peace for thousands of years. Even when the Western sect worked together to capture her, she still managed to escape from the spirited mountain. It was obvious that her poison was strong and her methods were powerful. Although the mosquito Daoran was not famous, he could be called the 5 ferocious insects of the primordial world with the other 4. Whether it was in terms of experience or methods, he was not inferior at all. Although he felt that Lin Yuan was difficult to deal with, it was only in this world. If he returned to the untainted world, the mosquito Daoran would go all out. Even if he could not defeat the existence of the Sage Realm, he was confident that he could escape unscathed from the opponent if he encountered an ordinary sage to be. Now that he was looked down upon by Lin Yuan, an inexplicable anger rose in the mosquito Daoran. "Alright, then let this poor Daoist have a taste of your abilities." The mosquito Daoran shouted angrily, but his body suddenly exploded. In an instant, a deafening buzzing sound had already spread out. Even the surrounding guardians of the heavenly gate who had cultivated successfully could not help but feel their scalps go numb. Looking at the blood-winged black mosquitoes that covered the sky turned into a black tide and surrounded Lin Yuan, it was as if they had already seen Lin Yuan's shriveled corpse. Back and forth, it's still the same two moves. When Lin Yuan saw that the mosquito Daoran had once again turned into a swarm of mosquitoes, he immediately spoke sarcastically. However, he did not dare to be careless at all. After all, the most sensitive organ of snakes was their sense of smell. As long as he moved his nose, he could smell a strong and almost choking smell of blood. It was as if what was in front of him was not countless blood-winged black mosquitoes, but the netherworld blood sea that countless powerful people would shrink back at the sight of. Turning into a swarm of mosquitoes was one of the abilities that the mosquito Daoran was best at. When he had killed the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit, he had used this method. Previously, he had wanted to use a similar method to deal with Lin Yuan, but Lin Yuan had blocked him with the netherworld black water. He had even killed many of the blood-winged black mosquitoes that had flown towards him. But now, Lin Yuan's different-colored eyes kept moving because he could not tell at all where the mosquito Doran's real body was hiding. It was as if every blood-winged black mosquito was the real body of the mosquito Daoran, and it was as if every blood-winged black mosquito was a trick that he had released. Chapter 11:13. Mosquito Daoran can create billions of clones. His real body could be hiding in the swarm, waiting for an opportunity to attack me. It's also possible that all of this is a smokescreen. Mosquito Doran's real body is hiding in the void, just like what he did at the beginning, waiting for me to reveal a flaw. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and quickly dismissed the distracting thoughts, coming up with the two most probable conclusions. The 5 ferocious primordial bugs were very powerful, but in Lin Yuan's eyes, they were just as so-so. Other than Mosquito Daoran, who disappeared after being sealed as a god, all of them became the whetstones prepared by Tathagata for the Golden Cicada Master. Mosquito Doran's cultivation was now suppressed to the Demon King realm in the Tianwu world. He could only rely on the mana cultivated in the Eldritch world and the Abijna that surpassed the Tianwu world system to fight. However, in terms of mana, Lin Yuan controlled the power of incense. With more than 300 million incense, how could he not be able to defeat Mosquito Daoran? In terms of Abijna, Lin Yuan had the system behind him. Even if he followed the Abijna that he came up with in the novels in his previous life, it would be useless. He could connect to the system at any time and find a suitable Abijna from the myriad worlds to turn into a skill. More importantly, Lin Yuan had already pushed Mosquito Daoran to such an extent. Today, one of them would definitely die. Lin Yuan was not worried that Mosquito Daoran would run away. After all, although he was now facing Lin Yuan, the one who really wanted to kill Mosquito Daoran was the Shangqing Heavenly Lord. If Mosquito Daoran fought with Lin Yuan, the Shangqing Heavenly Lord could only remain silent due to his status as a senior. He could not go out and take sides, right? If he wanted to be involved in this karma, why would he throw the immortal slaying sword formation to Lin Yuan and let Lin Yuan do it? Was it very difficult for Tong Tian to kill a Mosquito Daoran who had left the primitive world? However, if Mosquito Daoran were to use these incarnations to stall Lin Yuan while his real body prepared to escape into the void, even if Shangqing Heavenly Lord didn't do anything, he would directly point out Mosquito Doran's location and might even help Lin Yuan suppress the swarm of blood-winged black mosquitoes. The most important thing now is not whether I can deal with so many Zergs, but that I have to find Mosquito Doran's real body before the Zergs get close. Lin Yuan's eyes burned as he scanned the blood-winged black mosquitoes that were approaching from all directions. At the same time, he controlled the nether realm's black water to sweep towards them. Head-on and brainless recklessness were two different things. Lin Yuan didn't mind fighting to the death with Mosquito Daoran. Even without the reward of the immortal slaying sword formation, Mosquito Daoran came to the Tianwu world to kill him. If there was a chance, Lin Yuan didn't plan to let him leave alive. However, the black spear in Mosquito Doran's hand was the mouthpart of the blood-winged black mosquitoes. It was indeed not to be trifled with. The 12th grade lotus platform was formed from the 4 lotus seeds of the primal chaos green lotus. There were 4 of them. The one that Mosquito Dowran absorbed the tier 3 mana was the 12th grade virtuous golden lotus. Although those bodhisattvas and Buddhas seemed to be sitting on a lotus platform each, they were basically imitations. That was because the 12th grade virtuous golden lotus was a treasure used by the receiving Daoist to suppress the fate of the Western sect. Otherwise, if the tier 3 mana was absorbed by Mosquito Dowran, Buddhism wouldn't have appeared 1,000 years late. Even if a treasure that could suppress the fate of a large sect didn't have an extraordinary origin, it was still an existence that couldn't be underestimated. Lin Yuan didn't feel that his physical body could be compared to the 12th grade virtuous golden lotus at all. Without even trying, Lin Yuan was sure that once his physical body touched Mosquito Doran's mouthpart, the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit was a classic example. This is troublesome. An obscure radiance flashed across the Enchanting Heavenly Lord's eyes. It wasn't rare for Mosquito Dowran to have billions of clones. Even if his disciple, Turtle Spirit, died under this technique, he could only say that it was an extremely basic technique. It couldn't even reach the threshold of supernatural powers. Most of the insects that obtained this technique knew this technique. They looked like their descendants, but in fact, they were all puppet clones refined by their mother. However, Mosquito Doran's technique was indeed a little interesting. Mosquito Doran's real body was hiding in the void, but he didn't show his power. He just followed the swarm of insects and approached Lin Yuan secretly. He was even sure that Lin Yuan had entered Mosquito Doran's attack range. However, Mosquito Dowran still didn't have the intention to attack. He just commanded his clones to get closer and closer. Obviously, he wanted to continue to close the distance and pursue a one-hit kill, not giving Lin Yuan the slightest chance to fight back. The Great Tao of Space and the basic technique, coupled with the Mosquito Doran's mouthpart that could devour anything, it was indeed a little like a supernatural power. If he could use it skillfully, unless he also cultivated the Great Tao of Space, or he was born with unusually sharp senses, Mosquito Dowran would definitely end up with a one-hit kill in the same realm. I don't know if this black Jiao can take it. Enchanting Heavenly Lord reached out and touched his chin. His handsome face was still smiling, and there was no emotion of seeing an enemy at all. Lin Yuan's answer was, he could take it. The swarm of blood-winged black mosquitoes looked almost exactly the same. Even if Lin Yuan activated the Eye of God, he couldn't distinguish which one was Mosquito Doran's real body from the details. However, after trying all kinds of methods, Lin Yuan didn't get feedback from the system. Instead, it was the willow branch that Yang Mei gave to him. The emerald green willow branch kept spinning in Lin Yuan's sea of consciousness. It fixed and pointed in a certain direction. When Lin Yuan looked in that direction, it didn't take long for the willow branch to continue spinning until it fixed again. Obviously, it was guiding Lin Yuan to Mosquito Doran's position. He's really hiding in the void, a cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes. Among the great Daos, fate, time, and space could be said to be the most difficult to deal with. They could be said to be invincible among those of the same level. This was because the divine abilities and spells derived from these 3 great Daos were rarely seen by others. They were all existences that could unknowingly take the enemy's life. It was hard to say what level Mosquito Doran's comprehension of the Great Tao of Space had reached. However, Tianwu world was after all a small world. If one had to make an analogy, it was a world that was stronger than the setting of wind and cloud. However, it wasn't that much stronger. Even if Mosquito Dowran knew divine abilities like so close, yet worlds apart, this world couldn't let him use them. Therefore, Mosquito Dowran could only use the stupid method of hiding his real body in the void and slowly approaching Lin Yuan. Then, he would wait for an opportunity to make his move. However, using the Great Tao of Space in front of Ancestor Yang Mei was like playing with a knife in front of a master. Lin Yuan hadn't comprehended much of the Great Tao of Space from the willow branch. However, against an existence like Mosquito Dowran, when holding the willow branch, the methods he comprehended from the great Tao of space were completely useless in front of Lin Yuan. Chapter 11:14. Mosquito Dowran, who was hiding in the void, changed his position several times as he gloomily stared at Lin Yuan. He was completely unable to understand why this black Jiao's senses were so sharp. As long as he stayed in one direction for more than 3 breaths, he would immediately be sensed by the black Jiao. This forced him to not care about the consumption of his energy. He could only madly activate the great Tao of space, causing himself to constantly change directions in order to inch closer to the black Jiao. But this way, his plan would be completely disrupted. The spiritual energy in the Tianwu world was extremely turbid. It could not be directly used to replenish Fa Li. It had to be refined and then constantly remove the impurities within the spiritual energy. Only then could it be absorbed. According to the system's data, if Mosquito Dowran wanted to replenish 1 unit of Fa Li, he would need to extract 10 units of spiritual energy. Furthermore, of the replenished Fa Li, about 1/3 would be used for purification. Even worse, because of Lin Yuan's constant glances, Mosquito Dowran did not even have the time to extract the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. He was practically gritting his teeth as he approached Lin Yuan. Therefore, according to this consumption, when he reached Lin Yuan's side, he would have to explode with his strongest attack. Because his remaining Fa Li was simply not enough to support him in the void while waiting for the right opportunity. Suddenly, large swarms of blood-winged black mosquitoes seemed to have gone crazy. They flapped their wings and accelerated towards Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's eyes did not have the slightest ripple. He only slowly opened his mouth and spat out a large amount of nether realm black water, which melted with the blood-winged black mosquitoes like a black tide. At this moment, a cold light shone behind Lin Yuan. A blood-winged black mosquito actually drilled out of the void and fiercely slammed into Lin Yuan's defenseless back. A diversion. I guessed it. Lin Yuan's lazy voice sounded. Layers of black nether realm water formed a mirror behind Lin Yuan. The blood-winged black mosquito courageously smashed through 6 layers of water shields, almost stabbing into Lin Yuan's flesh. Only then was it melted into water droplets by the 7th layer of water shield. Those blood-winged black mosquitoes that were flapping their wings and making deafening buzzing sounds seemed to have lost their command. Some continued to attack Lin Yuan, who seemed to have let out a sigh of relief. Some froze in place as though they had lost their souls. That's it. In an instant, many of the Heavenly Gate Guardians who were watching the battle had a look of ridicule in their eyes. He had thought that this guy who dared to cross worlds to find trouble with the Black Jiao would be very powerful. In the end, he was like a silver spear with a wax head. He didn't even touch the Black Jiao before he was punished. Are you here to be funny? Right at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Another beam of cold light broke through the shackles of the void. A blood-winged black mosquito charged towards Lin Yuan from the opposite direction. Ah, I've caught you. However, Lin Yuan had already turned his head the moment the blood-winged black mosquito charged out of the void. He gloomily stared at the mosquito Doran's main body. He did not have much understanding of the space Tao. After all, his natural endowments were there for all to see. Even cultivating step by step was fraught with difficulties, let alone understanding the space Tao. Even the space Tao that he had used to create the limitless demon was borrowed from the willow branch. He had simply copied it. This allowed his limitless demon to have the effect of sealing space. As for relying on himself to sense the location of the mosquito Doran's main body, Lin Yuan did not have this thought at all. Wouldn't it be foolish not to use a treasure when there was one? From the very beginning, Lin Yuan knew that the blood-winged black mosquito that had launched a sneak attack from the void was not the main body. It was a smokescreen that the mosquito Daoran had used to confuse him. He wanted to force him to use his trump card, and Lin Yuan had indeed done so. As expected, the moment he used this trump card, the mosquito Doran's main body was immediately shaken out. After all, the consumption of the mosquito Doran series of actions was not low to begin with. After being forced by Lin Yuan's gaze twice and even preparing a smokescreen, the consumption had reached a new level. Now, the mosquito Doran could really be said to be going all out. With a thought, a willow branch flew out of Lin Yuan's mouth and crashed straight into the mosquito Doran. Immediately, the world was directly isolated and sealed. The willow branch that the patriarch of Yangmei had given him had actually imprisoned the mosquito Doran. This was not Lin Yuan's limitless demonic domain. This was a willow branch plucked from the patriarch of Yangmei's main body. What kind of existence was the patriarch of Yangmei? One of the primordial innate god fiends, the hollow willow, and the carrier of rules. It could be said that the patriarch of Yangmei was the manifestation of the great Tao of space. Once these innate god fiends were born with consciousness, their strength was not inferior to that of a chaos zenith heaven golden immortal. Obviously, this was because they were born as saints of the great Tao. It could be said that the moment these manifestations of rules were born, they stood at the end of the line in the eyes of countless cultivators and monsters in the universe. To be honest, toying with the great Tao of space in front of the patriarch of Yangmei was an act of courting death. This meant that the mosquito Doran was targeting Lin Yuan, and the patriarch of Yangmei was a very casual person. Otherwise, if Lin Yuan had killed the two fox demons sent by the patriarch of Yangmei, he would have killed Lin Yuan instead of bestowing the willow branch. Therefore, now that the mosquito Doran had attacked Lin Yuan, and the patriarch of Yangmei had no intention of attacking either, Lin Yuan could only use the willow branch to locate the mosquito Doran. However, in a battle between experts, unless there was an absolute suppression of power, even the slightest difference would bring about an irreversible change in the battle. The mosquito Doran had too much faith in his great Tao of space. Even when he was discovered by Lin Yuan at the beginning, he only thought that Lin Yuan's perception was extraordinary. Therefore, if he stayed in a certain void for too long, he would be directly detected by Lin Yuan. However, he did not expect that he was now like a turtle in a jar, being clearly arranged by the willow branch. A fake attack in the opposite direction. Sorry, but the willow branch had been pointing at the real mosquito Doran. The situation was reversed again. Immediately, many of the Heavenly Gate Guardians opened their mouths, but not a word came out. There was no other way. It was 2F** king embarrassing. Previously, they had thought that since this group of people dared to cross worlds to find trouble with the Black Jiao, they would definitely not be easy to deal with. In the end, the two guys who were dressed like generals acted like experts and refused to communicate with the Black Jiao. In the end, the Black Jiao only threw out a red gourd, and the two of them were completely subdued. Later on, when the young man in the blood-red robe attacked, the night market gasped in amazement. After all, no one had sensed that such an existence was hiding in the void not far away. In the end, the Black Jiao did not hide at all. He attacked again and again, but failed every time. Chapter 11:15. He had turned into a swarm of mosquitoes again and again. Originally, they thought that he would play some tricks this time. However, when he turned his head, it was just a feint. His real body could not be hidden from the Black Jiao's eyes. Now, not only was the Black Jiao unharmed, this guy even lost his own life. Brother, are you sure you are here to make trouble for the Black Jiao? Are you trying to make a fool out of yourself with your actions? However, after the banter, these Heavenly Gate Guardians once again realized that the Black Jiao's strength and foundation were probably much more terrifying than their previous evaluation. However, no one noticed that Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of relief. After all, facing the existence of the untainted world directly was not something that these people who had never heard of the untainted world could imagine. Not to mention the mosquito Doran's law of space, just his innate divine ability that could devour everything was enough to make Lin Yuan fearful. From the beginning, the battle strategy he had chosen was to avoid a head-on collision with the mosquito Doran. This was also thanks to the existence of the black water in the nether realm, which caused him to not want to touch the mosquito Doran, and the mosquito Doran was not willing to touch him. Otherwise, there would be no room for maneuver. If the battlefield was in the untainted world, the mosquito Doran, who could make Kundi and Jane suffer losses, would probably be able to kill Lin Yuan in an instant. But even so, the mosquito Doran was definitely an invincible existence in the Tianwu world. This was because there was absolutely no movement in the world that could be compared with the law of space. In those novels, when the body movement was deduced to the extreme, it could only give rise to shrinking Earth into an inch, so close, yet so far, and so on. However, this kind of divine ability still used a large amount of the law of space as the foundation to support it. What was the battle record of the mosquito Doran at his peak? In the Battle of the 10,000 Immortals formation, he killed the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit. Then, he flapped his wings and went to the Western Paradise to eat the 12th grade virtuous Golden Lotus. What was this? This was the use of the laws of space. Sun Wukong could travel 108,000 li with a single somersault. Whether or not he could leave the Dongxing divine continent would depend on where he somersaulted, let alone the Western Pure Land. This was the gap between them. In a situation where they didn't have any means to keep the mosquito Doran in check, it could be said that anyone who came into contact with the mosquito Doran would die. After all, once they came into contact with the mosquito Doran's mandibles, they would be sucked dry. Moreover, among the existences that Lin Yuan was wary of, mosquito Doran was not at the forefront. Hongjuan's generation wouldn't be so shameless as to personally deal with the current him. Or perhaps it could be said that they didn't have the confidence to kill him in the heaven martial world after clashing with the will of the world and the system. So before he went to the great desolate world to face these big shots, the only ones he had to be careful of were their disciples. But among these people, the only one who could really make Lin Yuan unable to fight back was Shen Gongbao. In other words, Shen Gongbao was sent to the investiture of the gods during the investiture of the gods cataclysm. Otherwise, with Shen Gongbao's skills, if he could successfully become a Chaos Daluo Golden Immortal, let alone Lin Yuan, even existences like Hongjun and Yang Mei would have to be wary of him. Shen Gongbao and Jiang Zia were both disciples of the primeval Lord of Heaven. But the interesting thing was that Shen Gongbao cultivated the great Tao of Karma. The great Tao of Karma was definitely one of the best among the 3,000 great Taos. It was even one of the few existences that could compete with the great Tao of Fate. Of course, in terms of status, Fate was still higher than Karma. What was Karma? To put it simply, it was to return what one borrowed. For example, Lin Yuan had borrowed the tiger skin of the ancient demon court before, so there was karma between the two. That was why Red Cloud Taoist dared to appear in the boundless sea and ask Lin Yuan to repay this karma. Without this relationship, unless the day when the world was repaired, the experts hiding in the dark would naturally fight with each other. Otherwise, Lin Yuan would not necessarily know the existence of these untainted bigwigs who hid him, even until his death. However, the prerequisite of karma was intersection. Only when there was intersection, there would be karma, and only then could people use such a chain of karma. Why was the status of fate higher than karma? Because fate never required two parties to have intersection. The so-called destiny was like this. Some people did things and the results they suffered were all arranged by fate from the beginning. At the same time, fate was also the most mysterious and ethereal great Tao. No matter how hard Lin Yuan thought, he could not think of a few people who cultivated the great Tao of fate. If he had to insist, the so-called great Tao of fate should be the way of heaven. 30% was destiny, and 70% was hard work. No words would appear in this world without a reason. However, after thinking about it, Lin Yuan's fear of Shen Gongbao lessened a little. After all, even though Shen Gongbao was a disciple of the heavenly Lord Yuanshi, he was one of the few outliers in the Chanism. He ignored the consequences of entering the cultivation tribulations without permission and helped Di Axayan to stabilize the Shang dynasty. He was also considered loyal and had recruited many capable people for the Shang dynasty. Without Shen Gongbao, even though the Shang dynasty would not collapse, its time of existence would be greatly shortened. Shen Gongbao had indeed fought to his death for the Shang dynasty. Without talking about the mythical background, the difference between Shen Gongbao and Jiang Zia was obvious. Both of them were citizens of the Shang dynasty. Everything they learned came from the Shang dynasty. They ate the rice and drank the water of the Shang dynasty. Jiang Zia was a member of the Empress Jiang family of Di Axayan. However, he did not hesitate to betray the country and seek refuge with Shi Qi, which was known as, never close the door at night, never pick up lost things on the road. However, this was just a later modification. In fact, Shi Qi was poor. If there was no door, how could one close the door? If there was no food at night, what could be lost? Could the Ji family of Shi Qi have a human king? Their ancestral skill was divination and asking for fortune. The so-called King Zhou of Shang dynasty is tyrannical. Feng Ming Shi Qi was just an excuse made up by Jiang Zia. In fact, to put it bluntly, King Zhou's thinking was too advanced. He wanted to highly centralize power and completely abandon the idea that the royal power was given by God. Therefore, Weizi and Di Axayan's two sons who had lost the right to inherit the throne joined hands with Jiang Zia, the father and son of the Ji family, to rebel. They even chose the time when Di Axayan was conquering the barbarians and the army had not returned. However, they almost failed to defeat the Shang dynasty. It showed how weak these traitors were. In other words, Jiang Zia, who was called a warrior sage by some later emperors, felt that he was old and dying. If he did not rebel against the Shang dynasty, he would die of old age. Then, what he had learned would be in vain. Therefore, he did not care about Ji Chang's ominous divination and directly started the rebellion with Ji Chang. If Di Axayan's brothers and sons were not traitors, this ominous divination was indeed correct. Chapter 11:16. Di Axayan, Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a cold light. Lin Yuan, who had the mindset of a modern person, did not admire many ancient people. Especially in the field of emperors, there were many useless people. Most of them were raised like pigs by the officials. For example, Emperor Taizong of Tang, who was called the Emperor of the Ages by countless people, was a typical example of someone who was completely controlled by the officials. At the end of the Sui dynasty, the population was around 8.9 million, with an average of 5 people per household. However, at the beginning of the Tang dynasty, the population was only around 2 million. Many people said that it was because Yang Guang did not manage the country well and was ruthless, causing the population to decrease greatly. However, the funny thing was that according to the historical records, the two emperors of the Sui dynasty, starting from Emperor Wen of Sui, had been investigating the escapees, and the population had always been increasing. During Yang Guang's reign, it had reached a small peak. Not to mention Yang Guang's great achievement of opening the Grand Canal and bringing 2 economic centers to China, just the money and food he had accumulated was enough for the people of the beginning of the Tang dynasty to eat for 50 years without even working. In the history of the dynasties, no one was richer than the Sui dynasty. Was this the actions of an incapable ruler? How far did the Sui dynasty and Tang dynasty have to go to such an extent to be able to wipe out tens of millions of people? Emperor Wu of the Han dynasty, who was known as the Emperor of the Han dynasty, had almost completely emptied the savings of the Wen and Jing emperors. In the northern expedition to the Xiongnu dynasty, the Han dynasty's casualties were only a few 100,000. They had almost wiped out the Xiongnu dynasty and opened up the Silk Road. However, they were still slandered by others as having wiped out half of their household register. Then what should Li Shimin's actions of taking over the Sui dynasty's 8 million people and leaving only 2 million people behind be called? Almost wiping out half of their household register? How many people knew, or were willing to admit, that Li Shimin had been copying Yang Guang's homework? Furthermore, he was not good at copying. Just like how everything in the Han dynasty was taken over from the Qin dynasty, everything in the Tang dynasty was taken over from the Sui dynasty. If not for Yang Guang leaving behind a prosperous foundation for Li Shimin, not to mention the Emperor of the Ages, Li Shimin would not even have a chance to become a wise ruler. This was especially the case for Li Shimin, who revered Confucianism and advocated the rule of the state. He had completely ignored the suppression of the ethnic minorities by those sovereigns who were both Confucian on the outside and Confucian on the inside. He had straightforwardly and efficiently arranged marriages, reparations, books, and technology. In the Treaty of Wei River in the first year of Zhengguan, Li Shimin had forced the Turks to retreat, almost single-handedly scaring off an army of more than 100,000 Turks. But in reality, Li Shimin had been schemed against by the great clans, emptying the national treasury to make these vicious wolves retreat. In this period of 20 days, it could not be said that these nomadic tribes had not offended the people of China. Furthermore, Li Shimin's imperial norms had been criticized by others. It was simply a reversal of history. It advocated enfeoffment and wanted the rulers to give up their power to create a country within a country. This was a typical example of a ruler being controlled by the aristocratic families. Most importantly, in the Tang and Song dynasties, Li Shimin was the role model of all the rulers of the Song dynasty. His name was like thunder to everyone's ears. On the contrary, Li Ji and Wu Zetian, who did not learn from Li Shimin, became the rulers of a generation. Li Ji's dynasty had the largest land area in the Tang dynasty. Wu Zetian was even more impressive. Not counting the civil war, she had fought 26 wars and won 21 times. Her land area was even larger than Li Ji's. However, this was Wu Zhou and not Li Tang. The biggest difference between the two was that Li Tang was dominated by Xianbei nobles while Wu Zhou was dominated by Han people. In addition to Wu Zetian's series of reforms, it could be said that before Zhu Yuanzhang, she had tied the emperor to the nobles to the emperor to the people. The aristocratic family's methods were almost ineffective against Wu Zetian. They could only madly discredit her after Wu Zhou was destroyed. Looking at the history of his previous world, there were only a few human kings that could make Lin Yuan feel deep respect. Other than the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, there was no other than Yingjing, Liu Che, Yang Guang, Wu Jiong, and Zhu Yuanzhang. Lin Yuan, who was born as a human, had a natural respect for these human kings. If it weren't for these human kings who risked the destruction of their country time and time again to push the Chinese civilization in the right direction at the nodes of each era, I'm afraid that China wouldn't even be able to enter the 4 ancient civilizations, let alone the existence of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties. As for these human kings, they had left behind endless favors for their descendants. However, almost all of them were labeled as tyrants. The best of them were people who killed people like flies. This was not even counting the human kings with mythological backgrounds. It must be known that even in the mythological world, these human kings had not missed a single thing that they were supposed to do. In Lin Yuan's eyes, even if their merits could not be compared to the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors who enlightened the human race, these human kings were still worthy of the title of emperor. If the human race flourished, these human kings would most likely become human saints. However, regardless of whether it was the Jiang Xia of the mythological world or the Jiang Xia of the real world, they were all existences that Lin Yuan loathed incomparably. This was a classic example of a traitor who lived off one's family and betrayed another's family. When it came to the Ming dynasty, the great emperor Zhu Yuanzhang directly carried out the matter of killing saints. First, he killed the second sage Meng Zi, then the martial sage Jiang Shang. Then, he appointed Guan Yu as the new martial sage. In the mythological world, Zhu Yuanzhang had cleanly cut off the source of Meng Zi and Jiang Shang's incense. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of yearning. Then, he heaved a sigh of relief. Yang Guang had been scolded as a tyrant for so many years, but his mistake was that he had lost. He had overestimated the southern aristocratic families at that time, thinking that the Han aristocratic families should work with him to expel the Hu people and take over the mountains and rivers of Han. In the end, his series of reforms made the people with Hu blood and the northern aristocratic families unable to make a living, while he gave the southern aristocratic families taxed the southern aristocratic families and supported the southern aristocratic families. However, because of a series of policies that suppressed the aristocratic families, the Han aristocratic families and the southern aristocratic families chose to watch the fire burn across the river, allowing the Guanlong aristocratic family to skin Yang Guang, the human king, alive. This was also the reason why Lin Yuan wanted to suppress the aristocratic families and sects the moment he established the northern frontier. It was because there were not many good people among these people. Even if there were one or two, their clansmen would be the first to stand up and punish them. For example, Di Xian's brothers, descendants, and the Hongnong Yang family behind Yang Guang were all like this. Although Lin Yuan did not have such troubles, there was indeed no need for such a group of people to disgust him in front of him. As he thought, Lin Yuan poured the nether realm's black water into the sealed space. From time to time, he would turn his head and look meaningfully at Heng and Ha. Heng and Ha felt their hair stand on end. However, they did not know that Lin Yuan had no intention of dealing with them. It was hard to say about Mosquito Daoran, but Heng and Ha would definitely not die in the Tianwu world. After all, they were considered the heavenly court's righteous gods. They only had incense tablets. Chapter 11:17. With the existence of incense tablets, it meant that they could use the incense of the thousands of families to rebuild their original source. Of course, it was hard to say whether the two generals Heng and Ha that were born from the incense of the thousands of families could be considered as their own. But what did this have to do with the heavenly court and the Western sect? They were only interested in the abilities of the two generals Heng and Ha. As long as they were useful, it was fine. After all, they were not the ones who died. But this Mosquito Daoran, not to mention that Mosquito Daoran had disappeared after the investiture of the gods' cataclysm. Even if Mosquito Daoran had made a name for himself like the two generals Heng and Ha, could it change the situation of his certain death? That was obviously impossible. Don't forget, the one who wanted to kill Mosquito Daoran was never Lin Yuan, but Lord Shengqing, who had been silently watching. After having a certain level of cultivation, death was actually not scary. Unless the world in which the three realms of heaven, earth, and man developed harmoniously, there was an existence in the netherworld that no one could afford to offend. Only then would one have to obediently enter the cycle of reincarnation after death. It was not like the three major underworlds in the untainted world, which were just decorations. Not to mention those powerful characters, even ghosts with strong resentment could not be taken away. So what if Empress Pingxin claimed to be invincible in the netherworld? If the 6 heavenly sages came to find her, wouldn't she have to let them go? Ask Empress Pingxin if she dared to directly declare war on the various forces in the untainted world. If Empress Pingxin was alone, she would most likely make Hongjun and the Xianmen pay the price at all costs. But speaking of which, Empress Pingxin was never alone. Back then, she was schemed against by Hongjun and turned into the cycle of reincarnation. As a result, the 12 ancestors of sorcerers were unable to set up the great formation of the deities of heaven in the absence of one of them. They could only fight head-on with the demon race. In the end, no one ended up well. The human race who had been hiding in the dark jumped out and created a loophole. Therefore, Empress Pingxin felt guilty towards the sorcerer tribe. Those surviving magi broke into the netherworld and finally found protection from Empress Pingxin. Who would have thought that Empress Pingxin would give up on these magi people and plot against the other gods by any means? If the netherworld didn't have an invincible master overseeing it, or if this master had some scruples, it would evolve into the netherworld of the untainted world. Under normal circumstances, nothing would interfere with the operation of the netherworld. However, when necessary, the reincarnation of the netherworld was nothing. Not to mention the Tathagata, who stuffed the golden cicada into the reincarnation furnace to be reborn, or the Tathagata, who was more ruthless like the Tathagata. He directly let his good corpse incarnation enter the reincarnation cycle and reincarnate into the spring and autumn warring states period, becoming the founder of the Taoist sect. He directly pulled down Hongjun from the altar and completed the transformation from one of the 6 heavenly sages to a sage of the Great Path. He even put the Taoist sect under the command of the Taoist sect and took away the position of the Taoist sect. The 6-soul banner was the ultimate killing move prepared by the Tongtian sect leader in the Battle of the Innumerable Immortals formation. The person who waved the 6-soul banner would inevitably be swallowed by the remnant thoughts of the 3,000 demonic gods. Even this could be done by the sages, who could take out a bit of the true spirit from the reincarnation cycle to reconstruct the physical body. The price to pay was just to think about what gifts to bring to visit Empress Pingxin and how to act obedient so that Empress Pingxin would be merciful. Like the Heaven Martial World, where the reincarnation cycle had not been completed, it was the same whether it was a human or a ghost. As long as enough backup plans were prepared, they could complete the Nirvana rebirth. The so-called reincarnation cycle was almost no different from a decoration. When the physical body was destroyed, the primordial spirit ran away. This was something that the living beings of the untainted land were most familiar with. This was because ever since Pan-Gu created the world, the untainted land was constantly undergoing incomparably cruel battles. Almost every day, there would be the fall of almighty people and the rise of new nobles. These were common occurrences. Therefore, even if Mosquito Dowran did not die in the black water of the Nether Realm, it was not a big deal. With Shangqing Skylord watching from the side, Lin Yuan really did not believe that Mosquito Dowran could leave the Tianwu world alive. Did he really think that Shangqing Skylord was just a decoration that only knew how to watch the show? More importantly, if it really came to that step, what did killing Mosquito Dowran have to do with Shangqing Skylord? Everyone saw that Mosquito Dowran was no match for Black Jiao in the battle of magical powers and finally died in the hands of Black Jiao. What did he do? He had merely squashed a lost primordial spirit to death. With a thought, Lin Yuan suddenly calmed down and said in his heart, "System, stop pretending to be dead. Weren't you very active when you were lamenting about the Supreme? Come, tell me, where's my Yao core?" The system maintained its silence as usual. Lin Yuan slightly narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "It's fine if you don't say it. But the problem is, do you believe that if you don't say it, I'll ask someone else and they'll tell me? Are you threatening me?" After being mocked by Lin Yuan, the system suddenly showed a line of words. Of course, it knew that the someone else that Lin Yuan was talking about was Hongjun. If Lin Yuan asked Hongjun this question, Hongjun would definitely not hesitate and would immediately tell him what was going on with his Yao core. It would not even make any requests to Lin Yuan. Because in Hongjun's view, his actions were to drive a wedge between Lin Yuan and it. When the time comes, without this dead end entering the scene, Hongjun really did not care about the system. This time, the one who remained silent was Lin Yuan. Although he did not reply, the silence at this time was enough to prove Lin Yuan's attitude. "You don't think that I took your Yao core and planned to use it to hold you hostage, do you? Is there a problem with you or with me? You're only one step away from the immortal state now. The Yao core is already something that you can do without. Then why do you think I took your Yao core? I know that it's useless to you, but I still want to hold it in my hand to disgust you. The system showed the words again, and the words were very thick, as if it was expressing its anger. Hearing this, Lin Yuan slightly narrowed his eyes. What was that saying again? There was no loyalty in the Sui and Tang dynasties. It was the same in the Eldritch Age. In the entire Eldritch Age, there were almost no characters with good character. Lin Yuan also knew that once he stepped into the Demon King Age, even if he lost the system, he could still gather the power of incense. With the help of the Tao of totems that he walked on, the Yao core was indeed not that important. However, in the Eldritch Age, there were all kinds of strange ways to kill people. For example, in some unorthodox ways, just knowing the name of a person could make a person extremely unlucky. If it was supplemented by a personal item or hair, it could even complete a long-range killing curse. Otherwise, those Eldritch Age bosses would not have practiced the magical powers that could sense people's names just once. Lin Yuan didn't even dare to think about what kind of blow he would suffer if his monster core was taken by others to perform unorthodox techniques. Chapter 11:18. This involves some secrets. I can't tell you directly, but I can guarantee that your Yao core is definitely not in my hands. Moreover, even if the Yao core of this body of yours is in my hands, I won't use any unorthodox methods. Bah! I can't use any unorthodox methods. I am the heavenly Tao, how could I use such things? The system was still using bold words to emphasize its anger. Lin Yuan still narrowed his eyes, as if he was weighing the system's words. For some reason, he had an inexplicable sense of trust in the system's words. If you really don't trust me, you can go and check the monsters you created. They don't have Yao cores, so they are actually no different from this body of yours. If you really want to find fault, I can only say that their consciousness was personally given by you. However, you are different. You are a lucky person that I randomly picked from the ancient times. Do you understand? Lin Yuan thought for a moment, then sneered, so what you mean is that I am still under your control. Even if you can't do anything to my soul, this body was created by you. From the beginning, I can only stand on the same boat as you. I think you might be mistaken about something. First of all, the monsters created by the system don't necessarily have to stand on the same boat as their master. Unless you directly instilled a large amount of false memories into them like you did, causing them to be loyal and devoted to you from the moment they were born until death. However, you should know that I have never done such a thing to you, right? Therefore, it is impossible for you to have feelings of loyalty and devotion to me. However, there are some rules that are actually very pleasing. For example, if the monsters created by the system don't have the memories and concepts that you instilled, their bottom line is that they will not directly harm you. However, not directly is the biggest word game. For example, if you rely on that person, then I can't do anything about it. On the other hand, you can even deduce some of my arrangements and tell that person about it. From there, you can attack me because this does not violate the rules. After all, you did not directly harm me. This is a lesson learned from the mistakes of others. It is precisely because of that incident that I decided on the current strategy, which is to completely give up on letting you guys grow together and cooperate with each other. Instead, I will adopt the method of each person having their own world. All communication and transactions will be carried out through me. Last time, when you asked for help, I chose someone who already knew the coordinates of the Tianwu world. Then it is not difficult for you to guess that since I have learned from the mistakes of others, I will definitely not let those traitors off. However, in reality, I chose the current strategy, not because I don't hate them, but because I can't do anything. So, you still suspect that I took your Yao core? The system's expression, the system's words, the system's assesses, the system's following the system's series of explanations, Lin Yuan's suspicions grew even stronger. The system's methods were all the same, especially this body of his. From the black snake to the water flood dragon, it was changed at will after a certain condition was met. If this body was not created by the system, Lin Yuan would have plucked his head off on the spot. However, Lin Yuan had used the system's ability to create before. Although it could combine different materials to create a new demonic beast, it did not skimp on the materials. While creating the demonic beast, it also took away a certain part of the demonic beast's abilities. However, if the demonic beast was really created, would it not produce a Yaocore? Or could it be that the system had only given him a portion of the authority, and it was just acting? The system's explanation was half true and half false. Not to mention whether or not there had really been a case where the host had betrayed it, it would be a huge joke to say that the system had no way of dealing with betrayers. After all, hosts like them were sent to various worlds from the moment they were selected. They enjoyed the benefits brought by the system and grew rapidly. Even those with mediocre qualifications could quickly improve themselves according to the system's planned growth path. It was like a complete assembly line, providing the system with an endless supply of powerful soldiers to fight against Hongjun. However, was it possible for the system to be defenseless against them? There was no need to use Hongjun, a fierce person who had stabbed it in the back a long time ago. The system had lived for so many years and had been to countless worlds. With this experience, it was impossible for it not to know what would happen if it allowed the power in its hands to grow without limit. When that time came, even Hongjun would have to stand aside. As for guarding against traitors, sending the hosts to different worlds, this sounded like a typical lie. Although the Eldritch world had been hunting down the system and its subordinates all these years, the current situation in the Eldritch world was completely different from when it had escaped. First of all, the Grand Supreme had become a Chaos Daluo Golden Immortal, but he was unwilling to leave the Eldritch world to find another way out. Obviously, he wanted to take revenge on Hongjun. Besides the Grand Supreme, there was at least one other Almighty in the Eldritch world who could fight against Hongjun. Otherwise, Hongjun would not have watched the Grand Supreme become a Chaos Daluo Golden Immortal. Therefore, even if the system did not take action, Hongjun's position in the Eldritch world was in danger. Under such circumstances, not to mention a small world like the Tianwu world, it was not suitable for the Eldritch world to settle down. Even if it was a medium-class world or an upper-class world, unless it was confirmed that there was someone Hongjun had to kill, or there was news of the appearance of a strange treasure, Hongjun would not leave the Eldritch world without permission. He would also not casually release his capable subordinates. Just like this time, Hongjun already knew that his death tribulation was in the Tianwu world, but he still only sent Mosquito Daoran, Generals Heng and Ha. It was as if he did not care about Lin Yuan, the system, and the Eldritch world's Eldritch world. Lin Yuan. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan's expression suddenly changed. Generals Heng, Ha and Mosquito Daoran. Such a lineup, was it really to assassinate him? With Hongjun's ability, when he last projected his consciousness, he had already confirmed the existence of the Shangqing Heavenly Lord. Therefore, with such a lineup, was it certain that Generals Heng and Ha did not send Mosquito Daoran to his death? Or, to set off a calamity? When he thought of this, Lin Yuan suddenly laughed bitterly and muttered, "I still underestimated you." Chapter 11:19. The cultivation tribulation was not a particularly lofty thing. To put it bluntly, it was also a kind of rule. The total amount of resources did not change, but the population was constantly increasing. When the population rose to a certain level, it would lead to the uneven distribution of all kinds of resources. That was the outbreak after the intertwining of fate and the superimposition of the chain of cause and effect. To put it simply, the things that could be obtained in one's hands were barely enough to support one's cultivation. At this time, if one wanted to live a better life, or even just to survive, one had to start a war with other people and other clans. The 4 great tribulations after the opening of the sky were all like this. To put it bluntly, it was because there were not enough resources to share, so various clans started to fight. With the fall of the dragon, Phoenix, Kirin, Wu tribe, Demon tribe, and many other forces that dominated the untainted land, the weak human tribe became the main character, which also meant that Hongjun had complete control over the untainted land. The investiture of the gods and the journey to the west were almost all planned by him. At this time, what they lacked was not resources, but Taoist orthodoxy and incense. Of course, the most terrifying cultivation tribulation was the first tribulation of the Dragon Han era. It was a period when resources were exhausted and could not be regenerated. The 3 clans each had their own territories, but they had to fight crazily, not for hegemony, but for survival. In this process, some people would inevitably be eliminated, and even all lives would be destroyed. After countless years, countless resources would be regenerated, and new lives would be born. After the first tribulation of the Dragon Han era, the dragon tribe declined and retreated to the 4 seas. Then, they began to go downhill. From the overlord after the opening of the sky to the point where even a demon king could abuse his power in the 4 seas, one could imagine how terrible the dragon tribe was hit. The Phoenix tribe also disappeared. Except for Kong Xian, Qinghuan, and other great demons, there were few who could fight. Kirin was even more miserable. It had to rely on the way of heaven to become an auspicious representative. Otherwise, Kirin would have been exterminated during the first tribulation of the Dragon Han era. The legendary immeasurable calamity was not handled properly during the calamity stage, causing the calamity to become immeasurable calamity. The entire world had begun to collapse and had completely evolved into despair. At that time, it could be said that no one below the sage realm would be able to survive. There were 5 catastrophes in the untainted world: Kai Tian, Long Han, Lich, Investiture of the Gods, and Journey to the West. Except for Pangu's Battle of Kai Tian, the other 4 catastrophes were handled well under Hongjuan's control. They were even planned by him. After the journey to the west, the untainted world entered a relatively stable period, which was the period when Hongjun was completely ruling. It was also a period of crazy wars. Those who were observant would realize that during the period from the establishment of the Heavenly Court to the calamity of the journey to the west, the Heavenly Court had gradually become stronger. Just on the surface, there were a total of 33 heavens. Taoism also had 10 big grotto heavens, 36 small grotto heavens, and 72 blessed lands. The Western sect also had the ever-expanding Western Pure Land of ultimate bliss. Even the unorthodox sects that were derived from Taoism such as the school of Yin Yang also had the 3 islands of Penglai, Fangzhang, and Yingzhou. If these places were placed in the normal world, they would all be ordinary names. At most, they would have beautiful scenery and a mysterious color. However, in the mythical world, these places were all the grotto heavens and blessed lands that were formed when the untainted world conquered all the worlds in the untainted world. Ever since the untainted world entered a stable period, all the wars were against the outside world. If one thought about it carefully, they would realize that there had been no more catastrophes in the untainted world since the calamity of the journey to the west. Therefore, many things had 2 sides to them. Hongjun was indeed a complete dictator. He even stabbed the heavenly Tao in the back with his own strength, suppressed the Tao of humanity in Tao, and tampered with the cultivation path left for the future generations. In the later period, the cultivators became weaker. In the early days, there were still a few itinerant immortals who could fight with the old untainted world experts. As the Chan sect and the Ren sect slowly declined, the cultivation path was almost cut off. Those old untainted world experts were also regarded by Hongjun as slaves, lackeys, and prisoners. However, on the other hand, Hongjun also helped the untainted world to avoid the calamity of the catastrophes. He also set up a series of rules, set up the heavenly court, and gave those cultivators a chance to be ranked as immortals. One could say that he was cultivating his wings, but one could not ignore his contributions to the untainted world, even if his starting point was for himself. But then again, since ancient times, in the untainted world, how many amazing talents were there? Yang Mei, Qian Kuan, Shi Chen, and a series of big shots, which one of them could shake the untainted world from time to time. During the initial tribulation of the Dragon Han, the ancestor dragon, the original Kirin, the 12 ancestors of sorcery, the East Emperor Tai Yi, and the Emperor Jun during the Great War of Sorcery and Demon. Any one of them was enough to kill the untainted world. Otherwise, the war between them would not have affected the entire untainted world. However, except for Hongjun, who dared to say that he could control, plan, shift the catastrophes, and even gain a lot of benefits from the catastrophes. The title of Tao Ancestor might not be suitable for Hongjun, but he was definitely the king of catastrophes. Based on the fact that Hongjun could dominate the untainted world, there was no reason for him to be a person who did not use his brain. Such a person would usually plan before acting. If he was not completely confident, he would prepare a few more backup plans. Now, Mosquito Daoran was captured by Lin Yuan, and Generals Heng and Ha were suppressed by the 99 soul-scattering gourd. The situation could not be worse. Hongjun's backup plan, or one of his backup plans, should show up at this time. However, the reality was, there was nothing strange. This did not make sense. Even if the backup plan could not kill Lin Yuan, in order to pave the way for other backup plans, a group of people should jump out at this time to kill Lin Yuan as much as possible. Therefore, the only explanation was that Hongjun felt that Mosquito Daoran and Generals Heng and Ha were enough to kill Lin Yuan. That was the situation. Therefore, Lin Yuan was sure that Mosquito Daoran, Heng and Ha did not come to the Heaven Martial World to kill him. In other words, this was not Hongjun's main purpose. After careful calculation, the Heaven Sovereign was about to be completed. At that time, there would be a change. Mosquito Daoran came to the untainted world to die. It was equivalent to repaying the karma he owed to the Jia school during the apotheosized catastrophes. At this time, the consequences of a chain of karma were unpredictable. Perhaps nothing would happen, or it could set off a terrifying catastrophes. He had thought that he had overestimated Hongjun, but he did not expect that the real killing move was hidden here. With a thought, the nether realm's black water that had been injected into the sealed space began to flow backward. It turned into black threads again and merged into Lin Yuan's scales. He gave up on chasing Mosquito Daoran. Chapter 11:20. Mosquito Daoran could not be killed. At the very least, he couldn't kill him yet. Mosquito Daoran had killed the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit. Even if he had the protection of the Grand Supreme, it was under the Grand Supreme's nose. Otherwise, with the protective nature of the sect leader, as long as he saw Mosquito Daoran, there was absolutely no possibility of him letting him go. Everyone was well aware of this. Therefore, in the investiture of the gods, although Mosquito Daoran had destroyed the plan of the Western sect and turned the Grand Supreme into a Buddha, which could be said to have made a great contribution, he did not receive any reward. He could only conceal his identity and not appear in the world. This was probably because the sect leader took the Grand Supreme into consideration. Otherwise, Mosquito Daoran's body and soul would have been destroyed. However, this time, Hongjun asked Generals Heng and Ha to accompany Mosquito Daoran to the Tianwu world. His purpose was to make up for this karma. This was Mosquito Daoran who had violated the agreement between the sect leader and the Grand Supreme. Not only did he come out again, but he also ran under the sect leader's nose. If it was not because he did not want to be associated with the Grand Supreme, the Shangqing Skylord would have killed Mosquito Daoran long ago. He would not have prepared a set of immortal slaying sword formation as a reward. Interesting, really interesting. Lin Yuan muttered to himself with a gloomy look. He murmured, "You are indeed an existence who plays with the heroes of the untainted land in the palm of your hand. If you were not so confident to the point of conceit, I would have fallen into your trap." It was not clear how long the Shangqing Skylord had been active in the Tianwu world. However, when the ancient demon courts suddenly disbanded, it was most likely because of this person. Otherwise, without the intervention of the Almighty of the untainted land, this group of escapees would not be willing to disappear without a trace. After all, no matter how one looked at it, the natives of the Tianwu world were not a match for this group of Almighty of the untainted land. Therefore, it was highly possible that Shangqing Tianzuan had imperceptibly intertwined with the karmic chain of the Tianwu world. The sudden appearance of Mosquito Daoran was tantamount to messing up the already messy karmic chain of the Tianwu world. Once there was a mistake, all the karmic chain of the Tianwu world would explode, artificially leading to a terrifying calamity. It was hard to say exactly how long the Heaven Martial world had existed, but one thing was certain. The Heaven Martial world was extremely ancient. After all, the existence of an ancient almighty like Hanbo wasn't a big deal. However, Daoist Red Cloud was no small character. He was originally one of the 6 saints. During the time when Daoist Red Cloud was favored, even the Western Sex Urshi had to step aside. From this, it could be seen that although Daoist Red Cloud had appeared when the Western Sex Urshi saw Red Cloud, they would most likely have to call him senior apprentice brother. Since an existence like Daoist Red Cloud had ruthlessly tricked Hong Jun, it meant that Hong Jun would definitely not let Daoist Red Cloud go. Because Hong Jun was a dictator, and he was extremely suspicious. Even if he had the strength to look down on the untainted land, he still schemed against his juniors. He even hid his true cultivation path. At the same time, this also showed that Hong Jun's desire for control was extremely strong. He would not allow anyone to challenge his authority to appear. The reason why he could tolerate Ping Xian and Tai Xiang was that Hong Jun wasn't confident that he could kill them. Would a dictator like Hong Jun allow someone like Daoist Red Cloud to exist? Ping Xian and Tai Xiang were existences that Hong Jun couldn't deal with even if he wanted to. However, Daoist Red Cloud didn't have the strength of a saint. So as soon as he appeared, he would be heavily targeted by Hong Jun. The reason he had been able to live peacefully until now was mostly because Daoist Red Cloud had been obediently staying in the Heaven Martial world all this time. From this, it could be seen that although the Heaven Martial world was a minor kiliocosm, it had existed for as long as the Untainted Land. The Untainted Land and Primordial Chaos were 2 different concepts. The Untainted Land referred to the world formed after Pan Gu had split heaven and earth apart, not the primordial chaos that had given birth to 3,000 ancient gods and devils. During the heaven-splitting calamity, why had Pan Gu fought 3,000 ancient gods and devils? Because when the Untainted Land was first created, it was only a minor kiliocosm. It was impossible for it to contain 3,000 ancient gods and devils. So, Pan Gu had no choice but to fight against the devils that had been born from the primordial chaos. But even so, there were still people like Yang Mei, Hong Jun, Qian Kun, and others who had escaped the net. In order to prevent the Untainted Land that he had painstakingly created from being destroyed in an instant, Pan Gu had stretched out his neck and killed himself. He had transformed into the Untainted Land, causing the Untainted Land to transform from a minor kiliocosm to a middle kiliocosm, and even a major kiliocosm. The Heaven Martial world was still a minor kiliocosm while the Untainted Land had become a major kiliocosm. This could only prove the greatness and terror of the great god Pan Gu. At the same time, it also proved that the secret of the Heaven Martial world was not simple. During this long period of time, the Heaven Martial world had probably experienced many calamities. For example, the disintegration of the ancient demon court and the grassland wolf tribe and the other great demon clans had secluded themselves from the world. But now, the heaven martial world could be said to have been peaceful for a long time. In such a world, no matter how many karmic chains had accumulated, it was not enough to shock Lin Yuan. Even without the interference of outsiders like Lin Yuan, Daoist Red Cloud, and Shangqing Tianzuan, the next calamity would probably not be far away. Seeing that the heaven and earth were about to be repaired, there would definitely be strange phenomena. It was normal for a calamity to occur. Even if it was to fight for the secret of the heaven martial world, the natives of the heaven martial world would beat the brains out of people. The only thing that surprised him was that Hong Jun had only projected the heaven martial world once. But he was able to make an accurate judgment that Lin Yuan, who had stayed in the heaven martial world for close to 3 years, could not make. He sent Generals Hang Ha and Mosquito Daoran in an attempt to cause a calamity. The word terrifying could not be more appropriate. What was even more terrifying was that if he did not have a sudden inspiration, he would have fallen into Hongjuan's trap. This point, even Shangqing Tianzuan, who was in the middle of it all, did not realize. After all, the existence of Shangqing Tianzuan was the most important part of Hongjuan's plan. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan glanced in the direction of Shangqing Tianzuan with a complicated expression. He sighed faintly. Shangqing Tianzuan was probably still waiting for him to kill Mosquito Daoran. Even if he did not kill Mosquito Daoran, Shangqing Tianzuan would do it himself. Because, he did not care. He was just an incarnation of the good corpse. Not to mention whether he had the means to go through the calamity, even if he did not, it was just a matter of time for the original body to condense him again. But for revenge, there was really no such shop after this village. He could not kill Mosquito Daoran in front of the Grand Supreme, could he? Chapter 11:21. To have such a, no, 2 younger brothers. Even an existence like the Grand Supreme would feel tired, right? One would die trying to protect his own, the other would die trying to save his face. Even the Grand Elder, who could suppress Yuanshi and Tong Tian, did not want to do anything with the 2 of them. He sent Tong Tian away for the sake of the disciples of the tribe of Jia who bore the thunder during the God Investiture Tribulation. He also sent Tong Tian away to avoid exposing the Grand Elder's plan. That was why he sent Tong Tian away, right? Of course, it had to be said that the Grand Supreme and Hong Jun had reached a strange tacit understanding. If one thought about it carefully, one could see that Hong Jun's purpose was to set off a cultivation tribulation in the Tianwu world to eliminate Lin Yuan. After all, the cultivation tribulation was merciless. Only by becoming a saint could one survive the cultivation tribulation. Even if Lin Yuan had the protection of the system and the will of the world, he would not dare to say that he could survive the cultivation tribulation. Similarly, this was the most likely plan to kill Lin Yuan before the Tianwu world was promoted. There was an absolute karma chain between Mosquito Daoran and Tong Tian, and it was not an ordinary karma chain. The conflict between them came from another world, and this world was much stronger than the Tianwu world. This karmic chain could be considered ancient. If it was suddenly stuffed into the karma chain of the Tianwu world, it would definitely be incompatible and complicated. Once it was triggered, it would instantly trigger all the karma chains. Moreover, who said that only Mosquito Daoran and Shangqing Skylord had a karma chain? Hang and Ha were not there for decoration, and they were not there to simply escort Mosquito Daoran to the Tianwu world. After the investiture of the gods, Mosquito Daoran and the Grand Supreme worked together to destroy the Western sect's Golden Lotus of Merit. Then, the Grand Supreme turned into a Buddha and became the Shakyamuni. However, there was also a saying that the Grand Supreme turned into a Buddha. The Western sect could not sit still and allow the Grand Supreme to take away the Western sect's merit and luck. Therefore, they separated Mahayana Buddhism and Hinayana Buddhism, and used Mahayana Buddhism to suppress Hinayana Buddhism to suppress the Grand Supreme. Looking at General Heng and General Ha, the two of them were originally the generals of the Zhou dynasty when they fought against King Zhou on behalf of the heavens. There were a lot of karmic chains between them. After they died, they were conferred as gods and served the Western religious sect completely. They guarded the mountain gate of the Western religious sect for countless years and preached the teachings of the Western religious sect. Even if they did not make any contributions, they could at least work hard. They were not well known in the Western religious sect, but they were definitely not small figures. Therefore, this was the Western sect's stance. Heng and Ha accompanied Mosquito Daoran to their deaths. To put it bluntly, Hongjun needed to use the karmic chain between Mosquito Daoran and Shang-Qing Skylord to trigger the Tianwu world's cultivation tribulation. Now that the Grand Supreme had become a sage, although no one knew what he was planning, he obviously did not need to give face to Hongjun. Since he agreed to this, he must have his own considerations. After these considerations, the Western sect that suppressed the Grand Supreme would not have an easy time. Hongjun was naturally happy to see this scene. After all, this involved the battle between Buddhism and Taoism, and even the battle between Mahayana Buddhism and Hinayana Buddhism. In addition to the karma from the investiture of the gods and the karma from the Xianmen tribulation, the karma from the Xianmen tribulation, and all kinds of factors gathered together. Although the Tianwu world's cultivation tribulation could not be directly pushed to the level of immeasurable, its scale would definitely not be small. For the existence below the sage, the cultivation tribulation was definitely a terrifying thing. Strong experts like the ancestral dragon, Yuan Feng, and Shixiang Qiren, who quickly became the masters of the world after the untainted land, were still either killed or sealed in the cultivation tribulation. Later, the 12 ancestral sorcerers, Eastern Emperor Tai, Emperor Jun and other experts not only shattered the untainted land, but also crashed into Mount Buzhou and were almost wiped out. No one dared to say that they could play with the cultivation tribulation. Except for Hongjun, the king of the cultivation tribulation. Lin Yuan pondered for a moment and glanced at Shang-Qing Skylord, who was standing in the corner. He activated the All Things Have Spirit skill and directly began to communicate with Shang-Qing Skylord through consciousness. He also explained his point of view. The cultivation tribulation. I see, Shang-Qing Skylord's eyes turned slightly. There was no sadness or joy on his face, but he whispered softly. The Grand Elder asked his disciple to come, not to help that old thief, but back then. No, how is this possible? Could it be that he had already foreseen this day? Back then, the Grand Elder and the Prime of Heaven had a verbal agreement. Even if the Prime of Heaven knew that Mosquito Daoran did not really want to kill the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit, he was just schemed against by the Western sect. During the time when the Grand Elder set a trap for Mosquito Daoran to be captured by the Daoist guide, Mosquito Daoran could be said to have been tortured. In addition, his stomach was rumbling with hunger. Suddenly, he was released by the White Lotus boy. When he saw a 10,000-year-old black tortoise that had been beaten back to its original form and was covered in injuries, his ferocity was stimulated. It should be known that the blood-winged black mosquito was an existence that was born in the Netherworld Blood Sea. Looking at the Nether River Patriarch's great wish of killing all living beings to prove his Tao, one would know that there was no quality that could be related to good that was born in this area. However, whether it was intentional or not, the Holy Mother of Turtle Spirit died in the hands of the blood-winged black mosquito. For the Prime of Heaven, who was protective of his disciples, the two sides were mortal enemies. The Western sect could find the Western sect for their schemes in the future. Whether Mosquito Daoran was willing or not, since he was stained with the blood of the Prime of Heaven's disciple, he could not think of escaping unscathed. The Prime of Heaven's protectiveness was so terrifying. However, there was never a fairy tale in the world of adults. What remained unchanged was always benefits. The Grand Elder and the Premier saved most of the disciples of the GS sect. At the same time, they sent the Prime of Heaven out of the untainted world in exchange for some promises from the Prime of Heaven. One of them was that if the Prime of Heaven saw Mosquito Dowren in the future, he could kill him. However, the Grand Elder only gave him one chance. If the Prime of Heaven did not kill Mosquito Dowren directly, then the karma would be over. Now, it seemed that the Grand Supreme had long predicted this day. Now, he had already attacked Mosquito Dowren. Not only did he attack, but he also successfully captured Mosquito Dowren. However, in the current situation, once Mosquito Dowren died, the Tianwu world would be set off a calamity. At that time, not to mention what the Black Jiao and the Red Cloud would think, even the Prime of Heaven himself could not guarantee that the incarnation of the good corpse could survive the calamity safely. However, if he let him go, it was hard to say whether he would have a chance to avenge his disciple in the future. Especially after the Grand Elder's enlightenment, the Prime of Heaven did not dare to say that he could not defeat the Grand Elder. Without this karma, if Mosquito Dowren came out again in the future, the Prime of Heaven could only watch helplessly. Otherwise, if he wanted to attack, he would have to fight the Grand Elder directly. Chapter 11:22. The corner of Shangqing Skylord's mouth twitched. Suddenly, he snorted and waved his sleeves. He said in a deep voice, "Boy, it seems that you are not fated to have the immortal slaying sword formation." Lin Yuan's eyelids twitched. He said helplessly, "Senior, please don't try to provoke me. If I really kill Mosquito Dowren now, I dare not say that I have 100% chance of surviving the cultivation tribulation. However, if I plan it well, I have a 60% chance of surviving. Senior, do you have a great chance of surviving the cultivation tribulation?" Speaking of this, Lin Yuan paused and said with a faint smile, "In the same cataclysm, some people are easy to pass, and some people are sad. Just like when the deification ceremony was held, the Ren school and the Chan school targeted you. If you were in a different world and triggered another cataclysm, do you think those innocent people who were implicated will let you go?" Shangqing Skylord snorted again. However, he did not intend to continue the conversation. He looked like a rascal. There was only one chance to kill Mosquito Dowren. If he missed it, he would have to face the Grand Supreme directly in the future. For Tong Tian, a cultivation tribulation would only hurt him. However, if he were to face the Grand Supreme directly, it was not like a sage could not be killed. More importantly, the death of Daoist Wen in the hands of Lin Yuan and the death of Daoist Wen in his hands are two completely different concepts. The Grand Supreme had most likely guessed Hongjuan's plan. That was why he sent Mosquito Dowren to the Tianwu world. He wanted to eliminate the karma so that Tong Tian would not have an excuse to kill Mosquito Dowren. After eliminating the karma, no matter how shameless Tong Tian was, he would not bully a junior. Hongjun knew that the Grand Supreme had seen through his plan. However, he insisted on sending Mosquito Dowren to the cultivation tribulation. In fact, it was a gamble. He was betting that Tong Tian would find a way to kill Mosquito Dowren and set off the cultivation tribulation. As for Hongjuan's confidence, during the God Investiture tribulation, the Ren school and the Chan school joined forces to target the disciples of the Jie school. As the leader of the Jie school, the Tong Tian sect leader cursed and even went to the battlefield himself, causing the entire Jie school to be destroyed. After putting aside the many schemes behind, the character of the Tong Tian sect leader was very clear. For someone like sect leader Tong Tian, even if he was not in the untainted world, he could still be used as a pawn by Taishang and Hongjun. Even if sect leader Tong Tian knew about these schemes, he probably would not care. For him, it was completely acceptable to pay some price to avenge his disciple. Moreover, although Shangqing Tianzuan was not a sage, as one of the three corpses incarnations, his real strength was definitely in the realm of a real god. As one of the Sanqing sect masters, how many incense and offerings did sect leader Tong Tian have? Just thinking about it was enough to make one's scalp numb. Moreover, sect leader Tong Tian now controlled the world. Even if the cultivation tribulation really broke out in the Tianwu world, Shangxing Tianzuan could still withstand it. Cultivators, demonic beasts, they all deserved to die. No wonder there were no demonic beasts or cultivators in the world that was completely controlled by the heavenly Tao fragment in my previous life. Even if there were, it was a legend left behind from ancient times. A cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes. When living beings came into the world, there would be karma. Whether it was good karma or bad karma, there would be a day when it would be repaid. The heavenly Tao's job was to use the power of fate to deal with these karma chains little by little. Under the condition that it would not cause a great disturbance, it would be eliminated. Even if an ordinary person lived a long life, it would not be more than 100 years. After 100 years, the gratitude and grudges would be erased. Naturally, there would not be much karma left behind, and it would not be such a big burden to the heavenly Tao. However, cultivators and demonic beasts were different. Even in a small world like the Tianwu world, cultivators could easily live up to 300 to 500 years on the path of cultivation. If they went too far, they would be like those great demonic beasts and cultivators, using the power of incense to prolong their lives. They could even reform their bodies after death and be resurrected. It was precisely because of this that the karma chains were difficult to deal with. Once there was a mistake, it would directly set off a cultivation tribulation. Senior, please reconsider. Lin Yuan's eyes returned to calmness. Seeing that sect master Tong Tian did not speak, Lin Yuan pondered for a moment. Then, he narrowed his eyes and said, Senior, you are unwilling to have karma with the Grand Supreme because you and the Grand Supreme are formed from the same chi. In addition, the Grand Supreme is now a saint of the Great Path. Senior, you boast that you may not lose to the Grand Supreme, but your chances of winning are not necessarily great. However, you are forcing me to do so today. Have you not thought that in the future, I may also become a saint of the Great Path? You, Shangqing Skylord's eyes moved. He was just about to mock Lin Yuan, but when he thought of Lin Yuan's deeds, he fell into a strange silence. The coming of a great era was a very mysterious thing. To give an example that sect master Tong Tian himself knew, the opening of the Hongmeng heavens was a great era. At that time, a terrifying existence like the great god Pangu was born. At that time, in the Hongmeng chaos, there was not only one intelligent existence like the great god Pangu. The so-called 3,000 fiend gods were naturally more than 3,000. Among them, there was no lack of terrifying existences like Yang Mei and Shi Qin who had mastered the great Tao of space and the great Tao of time. But what was the result? The great god Pangu fought against 3,000 ancient fiend gods alone and won. He even took the remnant souls of the 3,000 fiend gods to refine the six-soul banner, an incomparably terrifying treasure. Although the six-soul banner would definitely devour the remnant souls of the 3,000 fiend gods, the six-soul banner could curse and kill 6 people at once. Even sages could not escape from it. One could imagine how terrifying this treasure was. They were all fiend gods born in the Hongmeng chaos. Why was the great god Pangu so much stronger than the other fiend gods? The great Tao of force was very strong. When one's strength was unleashed to the extreme, fate, time, and space could be shattered. However, this extreme also depended on the level of the opponent. If it was an adult fighting against a child, a punch would naturally have such an effect. However, which of the 3,000 fiend gods wasn't the manifestation of the sky demon's laws? The monsters that were born in the Grand Era were just so unreasonable. Now that the Tianwu world was about to be repaired, it could be said that a great era was about to arrive. Looking at the whole universe, the only existence that could be counted as a monster was the Black Jiao. What was even more terrifying was that the Black Jiao's sage path was right in front of them. Once the world was repaired, the Black Jiao could be said to have become a sage. he could directly control the netherworld and the underworld. At that time, the stronger the netherworld was, the stronger the Black Jiao would be. If it was someone else who told Tong Tian that the day of becoming a sage was just around the corner, Tong Tian would definitely spit on that person's face. However, when the Black Jiao said such words, although Tong Tian was not convinced, he could not find any basis to refute. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.